You are clear for initial thrust.
Roger that. Moving out. Water impulse.
Nerd.
Man, I don't know how many times I hear this, and I just get goosebumps. I'm such a Star Trek nerd. I'm sorry.
Considering the quotes for the start of this episode, the only two you put in were the two Star Trek ones.
There's a lot of quotes, and I picked those two. Sorry.
Yeah. quite a few quotes for a 15-minute show.
Yeah. So if you come here to see, I am Robert. I'm sorry.
He's done it again.
This is not that episode. My name is Robert. I am your host for Science Fiction Remnant, and we have
This
our
is Captain Chaos, Geo.
Mad Scientist Ray down here in Australia.
And we're really excited today because there's this little tiny film that I saw that I really love. And I cannot believe that we haven't done an episode on. And we're lucky enough to have the writer and director of this film, Mr. Adam Stern. Hello, Mr. Stern. How are you doing?
Hi, and thank you. Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Awesome. And if you're not too familiar, I actually have a link to the IMDb. There are two other films aside from this one that are really good that you guys should see. So, as a matter of fact, what do you think, Ray? Should we have our audience go in right now and pause us?
Yes. Look, if you haven't watched this, it's 15 minutes. It's on YouTube on the Dust channel. So head over to the Dust channel, just search for FTL. It'll be right there. It'd be a well-spent 15 minutes of your life. Production values are very high for this one. I quite enjoyed watching it and rewatching it because I'd watched it several years ago. So nip over there, watch it, and then come back because we are going to spoil the shit out of this thing, all right? Because there's lots to discuss. Yeah. So it's great to have writer and director with us. So we're going to get the lowdown. We're going to find out what's happening in the background. It's going to be awesome. And Robert, your camera has died. It's decided, nope, I'm just not going to join you.
But you guys can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so that's the important thing.
Keep your pants on. We don't need any
feel
of that.
Perfect for audio.
Oh, sorry about that. But it is Captain Chaos and me. For some reason, not sure why, but awesome.
Well, before we got started, we had people's audio dropping out, so now it's time for the video to start dropping out. Even everything up.
I'll let Adam know. I'm like Mercury in retrograde. Whenever something goes bad, they blame it on me.
Works for me.
Awesome. So, Ray,
I think Geo's camera's frozen too. So we've lost 2 out of the 4.
The feed is coming through my computer, so that explains it.
Oh yeah, I'm supposed to do something, aren't I? Hey guys, what have you been watching this week?
wait, I go first.
Okay. Yeah, I know Star Trek. Next.
He's gonna be both saying Star Trek and have the coolest wife. She was Star Trek with me.
What a shock.
Okay.
Have you watched anything else besides?
Have you watched anything else? I was like, please don't say it.
Have you watched something else, please?
Have you
watched Babylon 5? Have you?
No, not yet. No Babylon 5. Yes. And for all of you out there who are actually watching our YouTube video, you'll see a little scroll going down this bottom that says, hashtag make Robert watch Babylon 5.
I haven't worked out how to do it yet. Maybe we need to threaten you with alligators or something.
Yeah.
Florida, man.
Okay, so who wants to go next? I watched Star Trek. There you go.
Nothing else. What have you been watching, Adam?
What Well, I actually just finished watching on the sci-fi front. I just finished watching season 3, the end of season 3 of Picard. So also Star Trek, which I quite enjoyed. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the most appropriate one to mention. I mean, I watch all sorts of stuff, but mostly sci-fi, and that was my big watch this past week. I had saved the penultimate and last episodes to watch back to back this week, and if you're a Star Trek fan, it's season 3 was really obviously a huge nostalgia play with the original cast, but a lot of fun to watch. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
And Ray, should I say anime or?
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Nah, look, every time I get a spare 20 minutes, I'll jump on to Crunchyroll and find something to watch. There's this cute little anime called My Clueless First Friend. And it's about a girl who's considered like the loner of the class. Everybody says that she's cursed, and she's called the Grim Reaper. And everybody teases her, and you immediately know the sort of character that she is. And this new kid joins the class. This is like 5th grade class. And this new kid joins the class, and he finds out that she's cursed and that she's called the Grim Reaper. And he's like, oh, that's so cool. And you can see where this is going.
Yeah.
and it's a character which I watch it just to feel good, because it doesn't matter who says nasty things about it. He always turns it around. It's like, really? Oh, that's so awesome. I want a bit of that. It's like they're cleaning the class, and he goes, why is nobody using this broom? He says, oh, because I use that broom, and everybody says that if you touch it, you get cursed. He's like, oh, you mean if I use this broom, I can get cursed quicker? Excellent. He starts sweeping with the broom. Everything about her, he's just enamored with, and it's just so cute. So if you need a breath of fresh air after watching like Event Horizon or something like that, check out My Clueless First Friend on Crunchyroll. It is cute.
And if you join us on our Discord, if you're watching the YouTube channel right now, and you see the little QR code there, you have to scan it, and it takes take you to our Discord channel. You can go to the anime channel, and you'll see Ray actually would post a link for that anime. Yeah. But you can join us for anything else on that Discord channel. We can talk about any episode, or including this episode here. So I invite everybody to just join up, and let's talk. Let's talk sci-fi. Awesome. So should we go to our first segment?
Shout outs. No, yeah, sure.
We are Science Fiction Remnant.
This is the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
We are the Caribbean Science Fiction Network.
We are Monorats.
We are One Accord Level 2 Podcast.
This is Jesse from Sudden But Inevitable and Open Pike Night.
This is Sci-Fi.
And if you're new on this episode, you don't know, but we have a hashtag called This Is Sci-Fi. And basically what we do is, if you're a creator, sci-fi creator of any kind, if you're a sci-fi fan of any kind, just follow and post to the hashtag This Is Sci-Fi. There has been so many things that had happened over the years on that hashtag that really, really gets me excited. It's basically, you have people that have a love. You have a specific IP that you love on sci-fi, and it's a way for you to vent out. Or if you're creating that one thing that is your baby, it is your sci-fi thing. It could be anything. It could be a podcast. It could be a book. It could be a movie. You post it there, and you'll be surprised how many people have not actually seen that otherwise would, discover it through the hashtag. And it not only helps discovery, which is usually what it goes usually unnoticed, but it facilitates the conversation when it comes to that sci-fi IP. And I've seen different things, anywhere from small IPs or very obscure to the last example that I gave you guys on our previous episode, where someone hasn't watched an IP from the Star Wars or Star Trek that they started watching because of the hashtag. And we also seen, as you know, there's a battle between Star Trek and Star Wars, and who what is better. So through the hashtag, it's amazing to me that someone that hated Star Trek decided to start Star Trek for the first time because of that conversation that was happening in the hashtag. So it's really cool. And if you hear me from season 1 talking about this, I remember in season 1, I went on onto the internet and trying to find the group of people that are so fascinated with sci-fi as I am, and I found the silos. I find the group that Star Trek group. I found the Star Wars group, but there wasn't any particular group that talk about all sci-fi together, and that's the reason why we started a hashtag. And I'm happy to know that the end results today is what I always envisioned that the hashtag would be. So, you guys, you have anything that you can call out for this week as far as the hashtag?
Well, it didn't come up under the hashtag, but it certainly would fit. So there's a Twitter post that I dropped into our private chat here that you guys can have a quick look at. It shows a video of a tiny robot called DeepMind, which is playing soccer. And there's this woman who's just keeps pushing it over, and it keeps getting back up and keeps doing its thing. And I was just thinking, like, when she goes to parties and they say, "What is your job?" and she says, "Oh, I'm a robot bully." It's like that's a new one on me. I don't think I'd put that on my resume, because when the singularity occurs, she's going to be the first one up against the wall, isn't she?
Chances are.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
But I mean, you watch this little robot, and it's been shoved over, and it's getting back up, and it's kicking the soccer ball into the goal. It misses the first time, it bounces off the rim, and it lines back up again and kicks it into the goal. And that's freaking impressive. Even you look at Boston Dynamics robot and stuff like that, and you just look at how far and how quickly robot controlling and movement and recognition. I mean, it's recognizing the ball. It's using both feet, so it kicks with its right foot, then it kicks with its left foot and gets it in the goal in the second attempt. All the while, this mean woman's wandering around, shoving it in the back and pushing it on its face or on its back. And I mean, like, I don't know anybody who'd put up with that crap. So the robot's doing better than 99%.
It reminds me of Will Smith in iRobot.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, robot controllers are coming a heck of a long way, and the technology which empowers them. I mean, we could have a whole pod just on this one video and talking about what it means and where it's going and how this woman's life is forfeit as soon as the singularity occurs and that sort of thing.
Awesome. You have anything else that you want to point out before I move on?
Nothing out of the normal. I want to remember all of our audience will always go and check that this is sci-fi hashtag. You can always find amazing conversations and topics of discussion through that.
Awesome.
So to me, that's always a way to go. One of the main things that I do on Twitter is that.
Awesome. So just remember, you can also give us a voicemail. All you have to do is pick up the phone and dial 305-563-6334, and your voicemail will be played on future episodes. Okay. So, Gio, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Shout out.
And for these shout outs, first off, I want to remember everybody, we're part of the Blind Knowledge Network for podcasts. Go and check them out. You can find them on their website, blindknowledgenetwork.com. They're on all social medias. They have a great variety of content creators. I'm sure you can find something you like with them. Go and check them out. Now, moving forward to our followers and engagers in social medias, RoboPulp. His tag on Twitter is at RoboPulp. Thank you for the comments and engagement. We appreciate them. Next one is Movie Drone Podcast. And the tag is at movie_drone. Thanks for the mentions and likes. We appreciate them. The Latin Jukebox. And that goes on Twitter at Rocco. No, Rocola del Rolo.
I love that.
That's how it goes. He always treats me. He always treats me. Um, E. Lee Zimmerman. Everybody got to go check him out.
SciFiHistory.net.
Wonderful folk, man. Always great conversation with him. 69 Whiskey. And that goes 69 Whiskey Pod. Great podcast, man. Always great choices and great references to good whiskeys. Admiral Furnace Frontiers. The tag is Growers. Thank you for the mentions and always being part of the life of the party in the Twitterverse. We appreciate it, man. And final, Finroll. This is a Discord chat out actually. We don't have his Twitter, but he's always in our Discord talking with us. Thank you for being one of our most loyal supporters from the beginning of time. And always sharing your amazing creative projects on Discord. And that's all for today.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go to the next segment.
The Outer Remnant.
And Gio, where have you been this week?
I've been at work, man.
I've been watching Star Trek, if anybody's wondering. And Ray,
you need to start, putting a camera on the top of the TV and just recording you and your wife talking about Star Trek, because you could just like have an hour in the life podcast and just throw that up without any preamble or context.
Let me explain. Let me give it a little context briefly, not only for our new listeners, if this is the first episode that you listen from us, but also for Mr. Adam Stern here that's probably wondering what the heck is going on. I think I created a monster because I always talk about sci-fi. It's all about sci-fi, and sometimes there's conversations that I've had about Star Trek, and my wife is wondering. Because there's certain things that she doesn't understand. Sometimes we're watching, for example, one of her shows that she likes is Lower Decks. And we find that we are taking longer because I'm pausing and going to YouTube and finding a reference and then showing her. And she kind of just got tired of trying to find the reference. So she said, what can I do? So basically my idea was, like, if you want, we could do a Star Trek rewatch in timeline order. And that gives you an idea, and maybe you'll get all your questions answered and you can join on the conversation. And she agreed. So we are
traumatized.
We are up to season 3 right now. But the funny thing is that I might be watching anime. She comes home from work and she said, okay, let's put Star Trek. And but I'm watching my anime. So yes, I created a monster. Sorry. Okay, Ray. So what has our resident evil scientist have been watching?
When did I become evil? I feel like that's a new tag for me.
Never seen
mad, yes, evil, not so much. But well, I'm doing my usual radio chaos thing. In fact, I'm over the flu now, thankfully. God, that was horrible.
Oh yeah.
Wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I missed out on a couple of weeks of radio chaos because of that, because I just couldn't stop coughing. But lungs are staying in the chest where they're supposed to be, which is nice. So I was back hosting Radio Chaos on the weekend. So it was episode 161, Being a Cyborg, What Do You Think It Would Be Like? So we had a really good discussion, deep, in-depth dive about, the whys and wherefores of what the technology might be like, the implications for social interactions, how it refers specifically to certain cyborgs within the story, how it's referring to people right now. And yeah, it was a great little discussion. We also had a big discussion about the news because obviously, unless you live under a rock and don't know anything about Alita Battle Angel, the Alita Army, that We got some really positive reinforcement from John Landau. He said in an interview this week that everything's going well. Don't worry, Alita Army. We're working on it. So it sounds like they're in discussions with Disney at the moment for greenlighting a sequel. So hopefully we'll hear something real soon now, TM.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I need that part 2, like yesterday.
Adam, do you know the movie Alita Battle Angel from 2019?
I do, yeah.
I'm the host of, or one of the hosts of a live stream that's been going pretty much every week since, when did we start? It was New Year's 2020. Basically keeping the story of Alita Battle Angel current and supporting the fandom and making sure that we keep making noise until we get a sequel. So we feel like the first movie got a bum rap, and it was an excellent movie. I know people who've watched it over 300 times. I'm only in my 50s for viewings, so I'm like weak sauce, but it is quite the rewatchable movie, and basically the fandom has been there the whole time, making sure that it's not forgotten about and that we really want a sequel. We've done a lot of events like flying a banner plane over the Oscars and the Super Bowl, and putting advertisements in the LA Times, and various other things. We raised $15,000 to provide a cybernetic arm to a person who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford one.
Wow.
A young person. So yeah, we've done all sorts of cool stuff, and looks like it might actually be, bearing fruit very shortly. So we're all excited. And of course, if you like the movie Alita Battle Angel and you would like to see a sequel, you are basically in the Alita Army, because it's a low bar to get in. And everybody on this podcast, well, maybe perhaps even yourself now, is a member of the Alita Army if you like the movie and like a sequel. So
hey, if Captain Chaos is a member, anybody can be a member.
That's right.
Wow, bro.
But if you don't know about the movie Alita Battle Angel, you're a new listener to the pod, check out the episode in season 1 on Alita Battle Angel, but do watch the movie first. It's well worth your time. Much like this show is well worth your time. So if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it, because we're about to spoil the heck out of it.
Yes, please. I actually have posted a link to the YouTube video. So please, this is a moment where you want to pause our show. We're long format, so it's okay. Pause it. We'll be here. Go watch the movie and then come back to us. Because yes, like our mad scientist said, we're going to spoil big time. So we'll wait here.
You see how Robert PG-13's everything?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you PG-13 everything. Right? He's like, we're going to spoil the heck out of you. Hey, yeah, look.
Hey, I am Mr. Vanilla, okay? Oh, so I would have to say to you guys that I am extremely excited because I seen this movie, I want to say 2018, maybe 2017. I can't remember exactly, but it's been a while. And is one of my favorite films because it not only is it entertaining, it is, to me, is very accurate to the science. Although that's not usually necessary, an important factor or knocking something. But it seems like everything was very thought out.
Yes.
And I guess Captain Chaos seen this movie because I mentioned to him about this movie. But Ray, how long ago you watched this movie?
Oh, yeah, it's probably around the same time you did. In fact, I didn't know about Dust until this was dropped into my feed as a recommendation, and I went, "Oh, FTL, that's faster than light. I'm going to watch this." So I watched it, and I'll give you my first thoughts later when that question comes up, but it was a case of this was the first Dust presented movie that I watched. I really enjoyed it, and sub to Dust thanks to you, Adam. So you got them at least one sub, and watched other movies there as well. So yeah, FTL was my first experience with the Dust channel, and it's been providing me with continued entertainment since that time. So it's well worth the sub.
And I don't know if this happened to you or not, but I had a hunger for the content, right? Because as you will discover, we'll talk about this in this show. It actually raises a lot more questions than it answers, which is great, I think, in my opinion, for storytelling. However,
there's a right way and a wrong way to do that, though. You can raise a whole bunch of questions by just not finishing off the narrative. You can have a narrative that just ends open-ended and raises questions not only with the science but with the narrative that aren't answered in the story, and you feel incomplete. It's like they didn't finish this. The story isn't wrapped up, but this story is wrapped up. You feel like it's had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yes. and it's certainly wrapped up emotionally. But then again, there are questions, sort of little tales at the end left over that could be explored, or you could just wonder about, and therefore it's quite satisfying. It's a lot more satisfying than something that just sort of ends, and you think that something that's 15 minutes long, you wouldn't have enough time to wrap it up successfully. And I think that Adam, you did a great job in wrapping it up successfully.
Mission Impossible did it. 15 minutes, you put it all in there.
Yeah.
It's that's certainly a challenge with the short form material for sure. So I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah.
So I had hunger for the content, and actually watched, in addition to FTL, Faster Than Light, I watched Levels and the Adept, and I loved all three. So why am I excited is because we decided to do the episode. And I had a thought. It's like, wouldn't it be great? Because we have this long talks about the topics. Where we, if you're a listener to Science Fiction Remnant, you know that. Sorry about my deep thinking. we usually have this deep.
That's a fancy way to say overthinking.
Overthinking. We have. Yeah, there you go. We we have these deep conversations. So I said, wouldn't it be great if we could have the writer and the director? So I reached out to Mr. Adam Stern, and you guys have no idea how excited I was when I saw that tweet response to send that Mr. Stern said, I'll be glad to be in the show. So this is my chance to tell you again, thank you so much for being on our show. And I hope that you enjoy being on this episode.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I do really appreciate it. And really, for me at my core, I am a sci-fi fan. I'm trying to, it's a privilege to have the opportunities, but to try and tell stories within sort of the science fiction sphere that people might want to watch and might be interested in. And I just love it so much. I'm trying to make things that I would want to see, that I think there's a huge thirst for good sci-fi out there in the world, in every medium, from film, from film to books to everything else. And it's great to be part of a community that's that enjoys the material, that likes to make the material. I think it's great that you guys are supporting, creators with your hashtags and everything. That's brilliant. I think there's a lot of stories out there to be told. So it's great. Yeah. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and this is the reason why I said, if you guys don't follow us on YouTube, you should go on YouTube. You are going to miss so much. There's going to be a lot of, if you're listening to our show and you notice that all of a sudden we get distracted or we start laughing for no reason, you're missing the context, and we're not going to tell you. So you want to go into YouTube, you want to subscribe and share. This episode will release a month after you hear it on audio. So there's going to be a slight little wait, but it will be worth it. And then you'll know what we're laughing about. So
there is another reason to sub to our YouTube as well.
Yeah.
And without telling them what's in the screen, let's have our very
Close the
own.
video, watch.
Let's have our very own Captain Chaos explain what we're trying to do.
Man, we're gonna have to get that short video made and just play it. I want to run out of way to play your eyes. But I told everybody, I made the announcement. If we make it to 10K subscribers on YouTube, I'm gonna make it the two of my butt cheek of a Spartan, making heart signs that says Spartan in the street, lover in the sheets.
So, like I always say, make Captain Chaos but your canvas. Okay, so oh, you guys are getting happy with a show. So, do we have a plot?
I think we must have a plot because we've got the writer here. If he doesn't know what happened, nobody does.
Okay,
Adam, would you care to grace us with your considered plot points?
Sure, absolutely. So FTL tells the story of the dawn of a new era in technology, where a faster than light spacecraft prototype is ready to be tested, and our main character is an astronaut that is tasked with this test. After a successful 3-minute odd jaunt to Mars and arriving in orbit around Mars, something happens and the drive spins out of control and sends him to the far-flung reaches of the galaxy, where he comes across what appears to be an ancient civilization, or the remnants thereof. But by the fact that his ship sort of structurally begins to come apart after being overly stressed, he appears, as his ship is about to break apart, to be rescued by some kind of beings or creatures that end up bringing him back home and reconstructing him in some fashion to be reunited with his family. And there's lots more behind that and around that and other thoughts, but that would be the general plot of the film.
Awesome. Oh man. So I guess it is time for your favorite question, Captain Chaos.
First thoughts?
Yeah.
So basically, if you have not watched the show before, the first question that I usually ask is, how old were you and what were your first impressions of the film? So I want to start with Captain Chaos because
old, bro.
Because he's the baby.
I watched it 2 days ago. I didn't know of this movie until you mentioned it.
He's the baby. So for me, first impressions for someone that had never seen it before are really refreshing, because I like to compare to what it was like for me when I first watched the IP of the film. So, Captain Chaos, can you go ahead and tell us?
I mean, man, we've watched many short films. To me, this is like the top film. Quality, story, the whole crew, all the cast, the director, like the writing, it was fantastic, man.
Star Trek references. Got to have the Star Trek references.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, no. But I mean, like, I'm not a Star Trek crazy fan. Like, I like their stuff. I watch the new movies. I watch some old stuff. Yeah, not like you, Robert. I say straight up, you gotta like me or hate me.
The blasphemy.
But still, even if you're not a Star Trek fan, if you want to enjoy a good sci-fi movie, like, that movie is the movie.
So,
And honestly, it made me, and I think that's a good thing. It left me wanting a longer movie or a series.
yes, definitely. Ray, I don't know if you want me to go next or you want to go next, because we saw the movie pretty much around the same time. And
you go next.
The film, I was actually on YouTube, and there's always that hunger for sci-fi, and this was, I guess, it was fed to me by the algorithm, only because I love sci-fi, and the title just got me, because if you listen to the show long enough, you know that I really appreciate the vision that is being made, that are representative of like scientific topics. And as you know from previous episodes, faster than light travel has been a topic that I really find interesting. And we have actually talked about this not only throughout season 1 and season 2. So when I saw that, I was like, great, I have to see this. And I was hooked. I was hooked from the first few minutes of the film. Hopefully you had paused us and go watch the film, so you know exactly where I'm about to say. But there's the scene where Ethan is in the ship at the beginning of the film, and looks like he's in a space station, or most likely looks like where the actual ship was built. And that scene right there, before they even spoke, with the music, the music, that's where it got me. Because when I saw that, that the shape of the ship and the rings, the first thing that came to mind was 2 words: Miguel Alcubierre.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first thing that came to my mind. I was like, oh my freaking God. Yes, I'm in. So don't be surprised if I've seen this film multiple times. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen it, but it actually makes it simple because it is a 15-minute film. So you could be on a break and you watch the entire thing. So
I mean, there's no excuses. Like you go watch this on your lunch break if you want to.
That's exactly when I saw it. Lunch break at work.
There's no excuse not to watch it.
So I watched it for the first time. I was hooked with the story. The perspective was refreshing to me. Although I was familiar with the warp drive from Alcubierre drive. It's a perspective, a story that I never really considered. And I was just completely hooked. It's like, this is very plausible in a situation like that. So Ray, I don't know what was your perspective. Was it differ from mine?
I don't know how Adam's going to take this, but there was a whole, like you said, Robert. I was exactly on the same page as you with how the opening shots and everything really set the scene well. I just had this sort of feeling that maybe using the International Space Station, and I know that they're expecting the International Space Station not to last much more longer than another 10 years. So this would have to be fairly soon, basically, for it to be, an addition to the International Space Station. So I thought maybe it might have been better to have had, like a different, like a more projected launch point, like maybe a space station that Elon Musk is considering, or something like that. Like the spinny one with the rockets attached to it, or something like that. Just to push it a little bit further along. But beyond that sort of just little, science niggle at the very beginning. I mean, the impression that the SFX gave really did feel like what you'd expect to see in a futuristic spacecraft. The touch panels that were very Le Cars-like, but not that sort of swishy business, the like more obviously what you'd expect a sensible set of readouts and things to look like. It really felt grounded, if you get what I mean, as far as the expectation of what it was, how it looked, and how it should work. I really like the way that was and how it was set out, even to the point where after the accident it was flickering and the systems were failing and stuff like that. It all felt really like plausible. So
understandable.
Yeah, and understandable. Yeah, so it did its job really well.
Because I mean, how many times have you watched a sci-fi film? And I'm sorry to interrupt, but how many times have you watched a sci-fi film that when you watch the controls, and unless they tell you what's going on, you don't get an idea what's going on, unless there's something really, really bad, and then you typically see red.
Yeah.
But in this one, although there was not really letters that you could see, you can kind of see what's going on.
Yeah. Well, obviously there were those sliders which had something to do with the control of the power, and one of them was playing up. You could tell that he pulled them all down and one of them stayed up, and it's like, that's the problem. and it's not like it's the old show don't tell in writing, where rather than saying, oh, and there was a problem with this and that and the other, you could see it. You could see that something wasn't working properly. I mean, some people who weren't, into the minutiae and the details may miss it, but the people like Robert and myself who overthink things and are looking for every little hint, we saw it. And obviously those are the fans that I think Adam was aiming at when he did it that way. I did have a question, Adam. The special effects there, how was that generated? Like, it looked, right up there with ILM and Weta and things like that. So, I mean, I couldn't fault it. It looked really professional.
Well, much appreciated. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I come from years in a visual effects background, so I've spent a lot of time in that field, and the way that we could make this film was because we had, for years, I owned a small visual effects studio here in Vancouver, and we basically made it a priority, and FTL, we shot, it was really under 3 days. It was 2.5 days to shoot the whole thing, but we spent about, I think in post-production, and there was a plan, and it was basically designed to shoot it quickly for no money, and then basically spend as much time in post-production with visual effects as we could. So for argument's sake, on the day that we shot Ethan, the Tyleson, the actor who played Ethan, in the ship, it was really he was just sitting on boxes in front of a green screen, and we basically built the ship around him, on the CG side. And that's where I have a lot of confidence, and I had a terrific team working with me to make that happen. And I'm really glad they read it. To your other points earlier as well, because it's not just that I want to make films, but I'm a fan of the genre, and I love grounded science fiction. That's something that's really near and dear to my heart. I did try to include a lot of references to real and or potential, hypothetical science, from The Drive, from Miguel Alcubierre, to things like, the Dyson sphere, Dyson swarm concepts, to the fact that, researching touch panels and how, future spacecraft are being designed with these things in mind. And the ship itself, although it had a ring, in the design of the ship, it's designed in a paneling methodology that NASA uses now if it needed to re-enter. There's tiles on that ship that are supposed to be able to deal with heat management and things like that if there's atmospheric entry. So, tried to think about it all. And it's funny too, I get a lot of, over the years, some really, people that don't necessarily pick it all up, but they have a bone to pick with well, how could he be having real-time conversation when he's in Mars? And it's like, well, we very specifically, sowed the seeds of him, sending out a quantum entangled satellite. And this is based on far-flung research, but the idea was, and it's very particular, it's very specifically mentioned in the story, that his ship has an entangled system, and then he sends out this entangled satellite and can immediately communicate in real time. But those that missed that thought that, it was bad science, or there's a number of bits in there like that. So I tend to.
Oh no, I picked that up straight away.
That's good.
All over that one.
So yeah, I mean, certainly tried, and obviously there is the Star Trek element to it too. You can't explain every piece of science in a science fiction film unless that's your plan.
Unless you're Star Trek.
Unless you're Star Trek. So it was trying to really sort of walk that line of an engaging story with science that trying to be as quote accurate as possible from the perspective of having it at least feel grounded, even though we're projecting into things that don't quite exist yet. But I think that's where science fiction excels. I think that's where you can have a lot of fun with it. Yeah.
Exactly. As long as there's internal consistency in the story, and it doesn't even have to be on the surface. If there's just hints to it, I think that's enough. And I think you've walked the line very well with your 15 minutes, because you would have needed another 15 minutes to explain everything, to have all the technobabble blurby. So people who are interested in science and up on the theories that are being pushed at the moment would understand when you have an entangled system. They would know, well, that's quantum entanglement, and it works on a method of basically turning everything into Morse code, and it's on again, off again, and then it gets recreated at the other end, much like the old telephone systems. So I mean, it as someone who understands the theory behind a possible future technology using entangled systems, it makes perfect sense.
That's great to hear. I'm glad to hear that, because most people have missed that, to be honest. So that's good.
Well, I didn't miss it because a good friend of mine, his name's Doc Joe, he wrote a role-playing game in 2011 called Rapture: The End of Days, and it's a hard science fiction with basically horror and theology mixed into it. And I waxed lyrical when we had the Event Horizon episode, because basically Event Horizon plays out like a game of this Rapture: The End of Days, to the point of the whole biblical element and everything. So in that game, there's the two major technologies that make it possible for interstellar travel and having off-world colonies is gravity drive, which is basically what is in Event Horizon. They have a gravity drive, and quantum entanglement communications. Right. So totally on top of that, totally see exactly where you're coming from. All works for me. I'm a happy science fiction fan. So
excellent. That's great.
It was. I thought that was very well done. Now, bone to pick with you. Why the hell didn't he put his helmet on as soon as there was a fracture in the hull?
I got an answer. Right? And I'm very curious. I wanna mention my answer first, because I want to see if Mr. Stern response matches my answer or not.
Okay, let's see.
Okay, so it is clear that Ethan traveled an immense amount of distance from Earth, where no hope of rescue, right? So now he got to this place, the ship is falling apart. So I was thinking, okay, if I was him, I'm going to go ahead and put my suit on, right? How long is the air going to last? I'm dead anyways. So I am going to give up, say my goodbyes to my family, and just fade away, because there's no hope for me being rescued. And if I put my helmet on, I'm just postponing what's going to happen anyways.
I wonder if it was done on such a shoestring budget, you didn't have a helmet for that suit.
So this is great. This is fabulous. So both of your answers are correct, and And
like
I can wax poetically about this, I suppose. But the interesting thing is so. So the answer while we were filming, when we had to figure out how to film this, the decision was okay. Exactly as you said, he has no hope, and so he's going to spend these last moments saying goodbye and not trying to delay the inevitable. That said, in the script and in my head, he absolutely puts his helmet on. He absolutely, because even though there's the possibility that philosophically, psychologically, he would say, okay, well, this is my time to say goodbye and I don't have hope, and why delay this? The training of an astronaut, especially a test pilot, is going to kick in. He would absolutely make sure that he was locked down and that he had, it didn't matter if it was only delaying it for 15 minutes, those 15 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever could potentially have made a difference. And in the longer version of this, which I can talk about at some point, he absolutely has his helmet on and he is floating outside of the remnants of his ship, and more things happen. The problem with all of this is we did have a helmet. It did not fit our actor very well. There's a limit to how many helmets you can rent that are going to fit an actor without having something custom built. And we found one, and I actually have pictures, which I've toyed with over the years, of posting them online every time someone yells at me for him not wearing a helmet, of posting a shot with him wearing the helmet. But there are two things, and this comes from also working in visual effects for many years as well. If you put a helmet on an actor, if it fits, you're also going to have significant sound issues. So what you then have to do is take the visor off and then put it back in visual effects. We didn't even get that far because the helmet was so constricting to our actor that Ty was so uncomfortable wearing it, and we had no, alternatives, that we just made the decision while we were shooting. It's like, okay, let's have him not wear the helmet and play this, that it's his last goodbye. So both answers are correct. That's the long version of the response. As written, he absolutely puts his helmet on. As shot, there was one spacesuit and one helmet we could rent that was within our budget that we had for about a half a day. So those two things had to combine somehow, and that's where we ended.
Wow. So Ray and I are correct.
Absolutely.
With different answers.
Yeah. It's a rare moment when we're both right.
And if you follow the show, you know that we are happy to disagree, the three of us. So,
but and look, I appreciate sort of the optimistic view of it is, and the gracious version for me as the filmmaker is that, oh, we understand why you didn't have him put his helmet on, but the reality is that's what we ended up trying to portray. But the reality is we did have a helmet for him, but it just didn't fit very well, and he was very uncomfortable. And we literally did this on a shoestring budget, so we decided to just do away with it. And go from there. And then, a lot of times I talk about the fact that, if you look at shows like Star Trek or frankly, you look at astronauts on the ISS right now, like they're not always wearing helmets. Well, Star Trek, they're never wearing helmets, but
never.
So I figured in a short film, I could try to get away with it. And that's where we landed.
Yeah. I mean, my thinking as a scientist is safety equipment is always used. So if you were doing a test flight of a experimental ship, you would have a freaking helmet on.
Absolutely.
Before you press go.
Absolutely.
Not when something bad happens.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. And given the budget for it, he would have been wearing a helmet the entire time. The one that we had, by the way, it was this old sort of Russian-style test pilot, helmet that was. I mean, it was this big, bulky 1950s kind of thing. And we're like, well, this just isn't going to work.
Didn't fit the aesthetic, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what you really need to do is talk to Elon and borrow some of those new spacesuits that he's designed.
Exactly.
That would have really cut the mustard.
Yeah, indeed.
Nice. I would have to say, having this conversation just gives me goosebumps. I mean, I rewatch again today with Captain Chaos, and Gio, most of the questions that we have, we're talking about it right now. Like, for example,
we spoke about this, man. We spoke about this, but we're talking about interplanetary communication systems.
Yeah,
and then you brought me a SpaceX one, and I told you, like, it's not the same.
Yeah,
it needs to be quantum technology dealing with quantum entanglement. Because now you got to wait 8 minutes for whatever you sent to get there.
Exactly. And you know,
You know,
my point is this is like the things that we're talking about are things that are not explicitly, you know,
public.
displayed, that you kind of just catch if you're
Yeah.
paying attention to the film.
Yeah.
And of course, because of that, we have to make our assumptions of what they might be. And so far, and the reason why I said I get goosebumps is that most of the assumptions that we have, you know, mentioned, like for example, one of the assumptions was a Dyson sphere.
Yeah.
They are correct, and it's, I think it's
Not only that, and I mentioned you this when we were watching today, which I think it was masterful of Adam to do that. Is a white dwarf star was being
Yes.
used for it. And if you put something like our sun on it, it would incinerate the crap out of it, being
Right.
able to be that close to it. So he did his due diligence.
I'm glad you
to,
picked up on that. That's really exciting for me because, you know, again, as to your comment about show don't tell, it's you know, you don't want to. You know, exposition's always a tricky thing, especially in science fiction. You don't want to sort of get into all the technobabble too much. But very specifically, that was, you know, it was the hope that people would pick up that this is an older sun, ancient. You know, there's technology built around this sun that has been capturing its energy and using it for, you know, type 3 style civilization. You know,
Yeah.
you're looking at all of the Kardashev scale for this and trying to figure out where this would fit in. And the reality of, you know, that this, if the civilization still exists, it exists in completely a transcended technological state and isn't sort of corporeal anymore. And these sort of entities that end up sort of scanning him and latching onto him, what they're really, they're just they're sort of almost sentient outpost, you know, constructions that are there because they've recognized that something has come into the system. They are made from the matter around them at the time. They are constructed at that moment. They deal with him and then they send him back. And it's kind of there's a lot of other stuff going on there. But yeah, it was absolutely, the idea was that this is a very old sun and an old civilization that might have not existed for thousands of years prior to this point. But its tech is there, and likely there are consciousnesses there that are living within the technology. Yeah.
Not only that, but I mean, the chances are that they didn't even were originated from where that star is from.
Right.
You know, like probably they came from another star system, and they're so advanced that they were able to travel. I mean, the Activity Drive kind of makes that a little bit more possible. If it was
Indeed,
real.
yeah. And I mean, I love, this is the kind of stuff I read all the time, and I love these sort of galaxy spanning civilization concepts. I'm actually just finishing a trilogy of books, Adrian Tchaikovsky. It's called the Final Architect series, and it's about sort of, it's a very interesting sort of, I don't read a lot of what would be considered space opera, I suppose, but the technology that he puts forward in this stuff is fascinating, and it's a lot about you know, what happens if there's sort of a mass outpouring of humanity into the galaxy, and how does that work, and what's the technology that makes it possible, and what would be the motivations for it. And that, I think that's and it's the same thing with alien civilizations that may have sort of laid waste to their own initial natural resources, and they've moved on, and they are capturing stars and the energy output of the stars. Yeah.
And how badly will humanity wreck the galaxy once they get out there?
Well, there's yeah, indeed.
If you think about it, it might not be then even, and this is hypothetical, taking into account the fact that there's more living beings out there, but warfare is the most universal model language, and part of the warfare is that constant exponential need to feed more and expand faster exponentially.
Yeah. And so it's, what's interesting is what happens at the boundaries of those expansions. If there's more than one civilization that's trying to do it, I think that gets really interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
When I saw the Dyson sphere, look how funny. It was so grandiose, the idea and how well put it was made. And I congratulate you on that, man.
Thank you.
The first thing that I thought of myself was, like, these two beings, are they people or are they like drone like devices? Like what's the metaphysical aspect of this civilization? I thought of like, what kind of folk or government they reached out. It's just pure singularity, and he has like a hive mentality, and just like thinking like how all this worked and came to what is going to be like. Just by that image, you managed that on my head. I was like,
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's great. I mean, that's the stuff that fascinates me. So yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah, I don't know if Ray has the same thought, but when I saw that, yeah, I second that opinion from Captain Chaos. I'm just the little details, like for example, how there's a pipe connected to that star, and you can see that pipe running out of the star and connecting to one of the rings, and then the rings you see how appears to be like windows where I can see from
the like there's people in there.
Yeah, I mean, and I did, sort of a reasonable, I would say less scientific and more from a narrative perspective, but I did a reasonable amount of research into Dyson spheres, Dyson swarms, and really my whole, going back to Star Trek for a second, I became obsessed with the idea of Dyson spheres and swarms from the Next Generation. I mean, they were the first. That was the first time I ever saw a science fiction, a mainstream science fiction show or anything try to show what that could look like. And it was one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek. And so we did a bunch of research, and I was looking at, there's a lot of thought these days, maybe a sphere isn't the most efficient way of doing it. And it's probably the most challenging from an engineering perspective. So then there are Dyson rings and there are Dyson swarms and all of these ideas. And what we tried to put across in that imagery was the idea that there were these rings, but there was a massive swarm of technology that was essentially orbiting this star within the confines of the rings. And those lights, could they be windows? Sure. Could they be just sort of showing the inherent technological kind of construction of this thing, that it's what I like to think is that it's sort of massive computational power, that it's keeping I love the idea that we'll reach some point in our civilization where we will hopefully, before destroying ourselves, have the ability to potentially transcend physicality. And the idea of uploads and all of these kinds of things are fascinating to me. And so if a civilization has made it this far and is able to harness the energy of a star, I like the idea that maybe there are beings living within this construct, but they're living in an uploaded kind of computational state, and the energy of the star is feeding their reality, whatever it is that they're experiencing. Those are the kind of things that I spend a lot of time thinking about. So that was sort of my idea behind it.
I have something actually to pick at it. Not only that, imagine that. I think, and I always tell Robert and Ray this on episodes and conversations, but to me, the branch of science that is gonna teach us a lot about the science behind the soul, the metaphysical of life, is gonna be quantum science. And we're just in the cradle of that branch of science right now. Like we don't know anything about it. But tap into that. Imagine if we can even tap into hyperdimensional travel, be able to understand all the things that we cannot physically, and because our condition, elementally speaking, is just not, it doesn't commute. But once we have the technology, how far could we go, really?
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that, what I find absolutely fascinating is, I think, to me, science fiction, one of the things that's amazing to play with is just the relative nature of all things, its scale and scope. The more that we learn, the more we're aware of, the less we know. And, I think that's there's so much in that. We base all of our understanding of the universe on our size and scale and understanding of the world. And the more we learn, the more we know we don't know anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're watching the YouTube channel, we are actually showing a still from the film where you could see the Dyson rings, and I can tell you this was very impressive to me and to Gio. How this is displayed, and to me, it's an example of what a combination of this, because there's multiple technologies here, would look like if it was something that could be that is visible. It's actually been shown by our mad scientist. Ray, what was, I mean, I started asking you this and we kind of got sidetracked. When you saw the scene, what was your first reaction?
I have to admit that it wasn't, the clarity of the scene wasn't as high to me as it was to you two guys. I saw Dyson rings and some other stuff there, and I'm going like, whoa, this is some serious alien technology, and that's about as far as I got. I didn't manage to dissect it quite as well as you had. So I learned something listening to you guys. So I'm always happy to learn something from
and you know what,
this podcast.
The thing for me too is and that's a really good point. I mean, obviously, I had a lot of thoughts. Well, not obviously, maybe, but I did have a lot of thoughts behind this. But I'm really glad to hear when people catch sort of all the things that we were trying to put in there. But it also had to be, accessible from the perspective of not having to try to figure out a bunch of stuff just to watch it. And so that was the aim. Was if you catch that stuff, great. If you don't, hopefully it looks cool.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm telling you, I know people that I will show them this movie, and they will think that that's not a dwarf son.
Right.
I don't start. They will think that that's a spaceship, and that's it.
Right. Yeah, sure, and that's okay.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because we have actually spoke about that in many of our episodes previously, where I actually like to praise films like this because it caters to more people. Like, for example, if you are like us, that have to deep dive into everything you see. It's a great film because there's a lot to talk about. I mean, if you look at my notes, and I was kind of showing Gio, my notes.
Did what I told you happen? What I predicted?
Well, we're still on it, so I'm still afraid. So when I see notes like this, I get afraid because it's like, oh my God, this is going to be a long episode. There's so much to talk about. But if you're not like us, this is a fun film. This is a real good film that doesn't need to, you don't really need to think deep about all the stuff to understand what's going on.
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate that too, because the other side of this coin is I wanted it to feel like a bit of a ride. It would sort of, certainly elements of what one of my favorite films. It's not such a huge thought-provoking film, but I love Star Trek First Contact, and I love that sort of birth of the warp drive and the whole and having fun with it. There was adventure to it, and I mean, there's a lot of nods to FTL to Star Trek, obviously, but even to the extent of the rock music playing at the beginning, it's just like I love trying to make it a little bit fun too. I mean, I wanted. My wife, who is an absolutely wonderful human being, has very little interest in science fiction, and I wanted her to, for argument's sake, watch it and appreciate it without having to know or even care about the science.
Did you like it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, I don't like it anymore. I have a really hard time watching it, to be honest. But it's been a few years, and when you make something, you can really see after a little while are the mistakes and the things that you wish you could have done differently. But this is a film that had certainly garnered some attention, and I've had a lot of conversations, and there's been a lot of interest in making it something bigger. And so, that's been going on for a few years. So. Yeah, I still like it enough to want to pursue continuing the story, and I certainly have ideas behind that.
I think me and Gio agree that a TV show is best.
I don't disagree with you.
I could see there being enough to expand on in this to have an 8 episode short TV show.
No. I want 5 seasons.
My pitch for this is I pitched
minimum 30 minutes episodes. Okay, episodes are running an hour now. Okay, just in case.
Well, 45 minutes plus ads. You got to leave space for the
There you go. Yeah, I think it would do there's 2 versions of the story. One is as a feature. The other is as a limited series. I think it would be a struggle to have it as an ongoing multiple season show, just because, at least with the story that I want to tell. And the story I want to tell, really, the short film is less than the first episode of the series. What the real interesting meat for me is what happens when he comes home, and sort of the idea is almost like Homeland meets Interstellar, where the decision needs to be made as to, is this him? Is this a construct? Is this an envoy, an ambassador, or a weapon? And where do we go from here? That's the stuff that interests me in this version of the story.
And and I don't know if Ray sees my point of view on why I said, like, obviously I was, I said that because I have hunger for the story, and me, when I have hungers about a story, I go above my.
Okay.
But
you go big or go home, basically.
Exactly. So the reason why I'm saying that is this story, to me, at least from my perspective, obviously, and that's why we love to have a conversation. We love having this conversation with you right now, because we could see the real story behind it. But watching this film, I see the potential of having a long running series like that, because there's so much. Granted, it might be a different opinion for Ray, because I can see how it could be stretched, like what you mentioned, Adam. Is he an alien? Is he really him? Is there's so much that could be explored.
Do you draw any inspiration from the host?
Sure, yeah, and I mean, the idea of I am obsessed.
I felt like that situation could be going on when I saw like the shining on it. I was like, oh,
yeah, like the nature of identity is a huge science fiction topic for me in storytelling, and it's like the idea of even your own identity and what you believe yourself. Like, for argument's sake, what interests me in this version of the story is he truly believes he's himself, but what if he isn't? And I think that gets really, on the philosophical side, that gets really fascinating.
Yeah,
and that the main character has to come to terms with
Robert about this.
Yeah.
Yes. Our episode Memories.
Oh.
No, and we spoke about this today too, Robert. Like, is that him really? Is that question that we have when we watch Star Trek 2? They get teleported. They get recomposed again molecularly. Is that the same person? Did their soul leave the body, and this is just a replication?
Did they just kill themselves?
Well, I have something to add to that conversation, and that is that you are not the you that you were 7 years ago. Approximately every 7 years, all the cells in your body are replaced.
You have a good point there.
So you are not the you you were.
That's
right. But you are still you.
On my self-identity has been here present all along.
No. But
it's not physically located within the atoms that it was previously.
I understand what he's saying from a physical standpoint and a psychological standpoint.
Yeah.
Because we have talked in previous episodes how you are you because of your past experiences and surroundings. So the you that you are now is not going to be the you that you are a year ago. Number one, physical, because of your cells are duplicating and exchanging, and you're always a new person. And also because your mind changes because of your experiences.
Now, here's the funny thing, and Adam did a great job with it. It's to the detail, man. Ethan, when he comes back, he's like in a frozen state, and then he just like shakes off out of it.
Yeah.
He brings all of those questions, and then it's like, if it's just a copy and you have ingrained memories that you really didn't leave.
Well, I think, and I'm not sure, this is something that was not expressed in the film, so it's only a completely assumptions from my perspective. But to me, I feel that to him, maybe a few seconds happened. He was in the ship, and all of a sudden now he's in the backyard of his house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of that, and he sort of, as you mentioned, he shake himself out of it. I think there's a moment of kind of possessing identity there, and also sort of potentially a time jump as well. So I think both of those apply. I think that stuff I'm just really interested in. There's a couple of visual clues in that scene, most specifically as he's hugging his wife, and You see a little bit of polygonal displacement on his face. You see just a little bit of a hint that there's maybe more to this that's going on. But yeah, and all this relates. I remember years and years ago, I had taken a first year university philosophy class, and I was fascinated by the ship of Theseus and the idea that when is a thing no longer a thing, and the idea is if you bring a ship into dry dock and you replace a board at a time with a new board, and then at some point it's all new boards, all new planks, is it the same ship anymore? And how does that relate to identity? And that's what I was sort of trying to get across with the character of Ethan. And that's the kind of stuff I love. It's like also the Alex Garland film, Annihilation, I think tackles this in a really interesting way. With the two characters by the end of that film are neither their original selves. Yeah. And coming to terms with that and sort of going on from there. And I love that stuff. I love exploring that.
Oh yeah. I mean, what I'm thinking to myself is like, if this is not even him, depending on what they did, because when they were taking him away, it seems like he didn't realize it was disintegrating head down. Like his body position is the same, but it was natural. It wasn't like it froze.
Yeah, it's almost like a snapshot, right? Both physically and mentally. It's and I love the idea that this technology could capture everything about a living creature, including mapping their brain, their neurons, or synapses, in that sort of picosecond that would be required to try to transfer a consciousness, and doing all of that in such an incredibly quick and efficient moment of time that they would have the ability to have a full reproduction. But is it a reproduction, or and this gets to the philosophy, the whole exactly.
Dude's been Xeroxed.
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Have you watched Altered Carbon?
I did, but for me, I've read all of the Richard Morgan books, and I liked Altered Carbon a lot. I loved the books. I absolutely love that. What he was, the idea of resleeving and all of those kind of things. Fascinating. Yeah.
And that's something that they pick on an idea that I even thought of that when I watch a movie. It's like when you copy something too many times, the data integrity starts to become corrupted.
That's right.
And I mean, that depends on the quality of the copying job too. Like this Civilization 3, but not Civilization 4. So they don't have the most advanced technology out there. What if that, even though it looks great to us, is beyond our knowledge right now? It could be done with such a poorly state that it can actually affect the normal replication to be as good.
Right. Oh yeah, I love that stuff. And actually, I have my new film that'll be coming out next year, which is it's a feature length film. It tackles some of those ideas a little bit. So
nice.
Can you tell us what the title is so we can watch out for it?
Yeah, that one is called Levels. Yeah, and that's there's a brief on my website about it, but basically I just literally finished shooting it this past March, and I'm in the process of editing it right now, and we will be finishing it by the end of the year, so that'll come out next year.
Well, I hope that it looks as pretty as FTL did, because I think he did a fantastic job of the effects there. You can freeze at any point of the special effects of this show, and it just looks pristine. I mean, even the harsh blue white of the dwarf star coloring the ship's surface, and the little pieces floating around it. It's just brilliant.
Well, thank you. I'm really, it's very lovely of you to say, and I appreciate that. And I'd love to take all the credit. I certainly can't, but had some really great artists, working very hard on this. We all worked together for, as I mentioned, I think it was about 3 months. So not a huge amount of time in the general scheme of things, but as far as a 15-minute short film goes, I think there was well into at least 150 to 200 visual effects shots, which was, a lot for this. But yeah, it was a labor of love for sure. We really enjoyed it.
I have a question about Levels.
Sure.
The one that you have, I think it was Dust. There's one short. Is that related to that short, or is it something completely different?
No, so I have Dust has 2 of my shorts up, FTL and another one called the Adept. Levels is a completely different project. It's not related to Dust at all at this point.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, it's a feature I can actually send you. Well, if you look on if you have my site information, there's a piece on some of the cast announcements and all of those kinds of things that came out last month. But we've been fairly quiet about it up to this point because it's still in process. But this is a film that has distribution. It will be available globally, and I'd love to talk more to that. I can't yet, but it will hopefully have a decent audience. Yeah.
And keep us posted. You have my contact information. So basically, what we are very, very interested in watching it wherever medium that is available at, and we'll definitely push it out to our audience as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep you posted on that one. This is the first film I've made that I'm not in control of when it actually gets released, although I'm in control of getting it finished and delivered. And so I'm not sure when it's going to be put out in various, places around the world, but I know that for argument's sake, it will be out. We already know it will be coming out in the United States and Canada. It will be coming out in Europe, and it will sort of go from there. We'll see how it goes, but hopefully it will be out globally 2024.
Awesome. And I guess my final question on that one, is there without you giving out anything about the film, obviously, is there an oversimplified synopsis or short version of the plot or idea?
A trailer.
Kind of like a trailer that you can, if it's possible. I mean, if it's not possible.
The paragraph that would end up on Google when you Googled it.
Yeah, well, what I can give you is sort of a paraphrase, because I never remember it, but the paraphrased version of the log line, which is I think up on IMDb now, which basically says, something along the lines of when a man sees the love of his life, his girlfriend, brutally murdered in front of him, he starts an investigation that begins to basically break down his very idea of his own reality, and sort of goes from there. It's a film that happens. I can't say too much yet, but it basically it's in our future, and it explores again the nature of reality, identity, the things that I'm really fascinated by. All told within from the perspective of it's a sci-fi thriller, but from the perspective of a love story, and what those kind of connections mean.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm hooked.
Oh, me too, bro.
We have a great cast too, by the way. I don't know if you've watched The Expanse on Amazon, but
oh my God, we love it.
Oh, good. So
these two are Expanse nuts,
okay.
right?
Yeah, we got an episode in season 1.
Familiar with
Another.
Drummer is played by Kara G. She is the lead female actor in this film.
Nice.
And she's absolutely fantastic. And actually, for any Stargate fans, David Hewlett is in the film. He's McKay from the series. And then we've got a few other. We've got our excellent our lead. Our male lead playing opposite Kara G is a guy by the name of Peter Mooney, who's fantastic. So it's a very good cast, and Kara G is absolutely amazing in this. She's when I first wrote the script, I had her in mind as the character, and I didn't know her. I reached out to her via her agent, and she's like, "I'm in." So that was very exciting for me. So yeah, it's certainly if the film flops, it's not because it's a bad cast.
What is the expected, again, if you can't say, that's fine. What is the expected runtime of the film?
Right now, I mean, I'm literally putting the final touches on my director's cut right now, and I think it's coming in, it'll be 95 to 100 minutes, something like that.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's not an overly long feature film, it's somewhere shy of 2 hours. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, feature films never used to be that long. It's more a modern storytelling thing that they get longer and longer and longer.
Yeah. I mean, part of that too, when I wrote the script, it clocked in at around, I think, 110 pages, which sort of is maybe around 110 minutes. You know, if you do that minute a page kind of calculation. It also was, well, what can we afford? This isn't a really big budget film. I mean, it's a budgeted film. It's not made on a shoestring, but you know, the budget also dictates the number of days that you can shoot, which also dictates the runtime that you can end up having and all of those kinds of things. So we shot it just shy of 4 weeks worth of shooting. Yeah, I think the length is correct for the story, though. Principally, it makes sense to tell the story and not try to make it sort of longer than it is. It's a fairly tight story, but it seems to work.
Look, you can lose your audience if you make it too long. I mean, if you want to tell a story, you tell the story. You don't overblow it. So
that's right. Yeah,
I think you're making the right choice. Speaking of story ideas and sort of elements that I saw from other things, you mentioned First Contact, which is the first thing I thought of when I saw this. I'm thinking, ooh, yes. Star Trek references, first FTL flight, First Contact.
Unabashedly. I mean, I love that stuff. Yeah.
And then when the accident happened and he ended up near the neutron star, I'm like, oh, the Vulcans have sort of upgraded a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's funny, but that's exactly what my wife said when we watched that scene. It's like, hey, where are the Vulcans?
Yeah. And it's, you know, when I first made this, I have to admit, you know, the idea behind this was, you know, there's obvious references, there are inspirations. I wanted to make something that I enjoyed, that was fun, that called upon things that I was interested in. I never, to me, and this goes back to Ray, one of your earlier points about, and which I appreciate about it being a self-contained story. I didn't know if it's like, let's test the waters, let's make this film and see what happens. If nothing ever more comes of it, I want to tell a little story that I enjoy, that draws upon the things that I love as a fan. And so if nothing else, that's what it was. And if other things happen, that's great, but it's certainly nothing I'm counting on, because certainly one of the things I've learned as a filmmaker is going through this process. You put a short out that gets a lot of views, you get a lot of attention from, you know, Hollywood, you have a lot of meetings, and then nothing really happens. Or if it does, you know, it takes a long time in development. So one of the things I decided to do with this film, Levels, that I'm in the process of, is just sort of taking the reins and taking control of the situation and not waiting for somebody to give me permission to make my next film. I had a lot of people with FTL saying, we love this, let's make this something bigger. And then, you know, the meetings start and the attachments and the development. And then all of a sudden years go by. You know, this came out in 2017, as you mentioned. It didn't come online until 2018 because it did the film festival circuit for a year prior. But that's still 5 years ago. And if I had listened to all the people that told me we were going to make a movie or make a television series of this, I would have made 50 versions of this by now. So, you know, it's, to me, it's sort of on to the next. But if Levels has some success, this is something I'd love to go back to, because I do believe there's a good story to tell here in a longer form.
Oh, and I'll be so happy.
Me too.
If you redo that opening scene, consider a different space station. I think
that's fair. Yeah.
The science nuts will be going.
Yeah. That's fair.
You know, Ray, when you mentioned that, I had to comment. I kind of had the same or slightly same opinion, but then I thought, you know, this is probably a new upgraded version of that station.
That was the idea.
So I don't know. I mean, just to play the devil's advocate here, I initially thought that, and then my mind changed and said, you know, this.
Can I share my? Sorry to interrupt you. Can I share my screen with you? Can I show
sure.
you?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, here, let me just that we're on this topic. Let me see if I can show you something here. I'll share. Let's see. Am I sharing now or no?
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm waiting for that.
It's showing blue, but it's not actually doing anything. So let me hold on. This is
when
showing.
You click on the share button, it will give you the option to what you want to share.
Yeah, I sort of did that, but I'm clicking around, but nothing's actually happening. So let's see if unable to share screen. Screen sharing is not allowed, is what it says to me. Maybe.
Oh.
Might be a browser thing. That's too bad, because I'd love to show you if I could. I'll try one more time here.
What browser are you using, Safari or Chrome?
I switched over to Safari.
Okay.
I've got some fun images, but it might not let me.
But
there has to be a, like, for example, and I'm sure Safari is the same thing. I'm using Chrome for Mac.
Yeah.
Do you have to allow under site settings? I think it's Java that you have to allow it for that.
Yeah, and it's giving me the option of allowing to share window or screen. So I've tried window. Let me just try the whole screen. Oh, that didn't work at all.
Oh, I see it. I see it.
Yeah, no, it's the security options of Mac on the.
Oh, wow.
Oh, and you know what I've done now, of course, is I had a recursive infinite screen happening there for a second, but let me try one more thing. You could see that for a second, huh?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll try one more time here. Share window.
That was a cool station. Oh my God.
Can you see that now?
Let's see. I'm waiting for the.
Okay, it's not working. That's too bad. All right. I'll stop wasting the time. Anyway, what I wanted to show you is, and I can post this or send them to you as show notes afterwards, that we did a number of concepts for the space station, which were very non-ISS. We sort of built on the idea of, solar power and how things would expand outwards. But we had other versions that were much more sort of science fictional.
Oh, man.
We ended up sticking with this version because visually we felt that it would provide enough of a grounded reference so people could understand what it was. But in my earlier concepts for what that was, it was a new and much different space station where it was space dock meets, new version of something like ISS. Yeah.
There's one question that I had, actually, definitely when me and Gio were watching this, which, by the way, for all of you out listener, we usually have a watch party on our Discord. So if you're not in our Discord, you're missing out. So we were watching this in one of our watch parties. And right now, as it stands on YouTube, I haven't checked on like Dust. Obviously, I don't know that information is provided, but on YouTube, and one of the links which is the one that I have on our show notes for the film, as in right now, is clocked at 2.98 million. Is it subscribers? No, hold on a second. 331. And what was the other one? So the question that I was going to ask is, I couldn't find how much the film cost to make. I did an estimate, and I'm kind of curious to see how off I am. In average, I doing my research, it could be anywhere from 700 to 1500 per minute. So counting that this is a 15-minute film, my calculations tell me that this could be anywhere from over $10,000 to about $23,000 to make, and that's not even counting for how much you got to pay the actors.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. And I'm not sure if you were referring, by the way, earlier to views. I know that FTL has had somewhere near 25 million views at this point. I think the bulk of them are from Dust. I think there's 20 plus million via Dust, and then FTL was up on its own channel for a little while, and I think it still is. And on that alone, I think it's another 2.5 to 3 million. And then it initially went up on Vimeo, which was like another, I think, million or so or something. I haven't looked on that one in a long time, but so it's definitely made the rounds, which is great. But Dust well, it kind of exploded prior to Dust, and then Dust said, "Well, we would like this on our channel." And by the time it was on Dust, we had already racked up, hundreds of thousands of views. But I think Dust really put it over the edge. As far as the cost of the film, so in a nutshell, I mean, you're not far off, but that would be the cost of physical production. So in other words, I think we spent somewhere between 15 and 20,000 Canadian dollars entirely on renting the soundstage, paying a very small crew and the actors, but paying really closer to honorariums. There wasn't a lot of money. I think our actors each made a few $100s, that kind of thing. the food, renting some equipment. I think we spent $4,000 or $5,000 renting. I have a camera, but we had to rent, a truck full of gear to, shoot the film. If we were to budget this, if someone presented this to me and asked me to cost out what the visual effects would cost, add another $500,000 to $1 million. Because, if you're talking about around 140 visual effects shots, where many of the shots are constructed from whole cloth, a typical budget for that would certainly be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. So that's where we didn't spend the money. You were very close in your estimate, and I think in cash out of pocket, it was somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000.
Wow. Yeah,
it's true.
Me and Gio were talking about the visual effects. They're just amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Reference. You remember the movie Space Reaper, the Korean movie?
Yes.
You remember that costed like $3 million?
Yes.
For the CGI.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the movie was like great CGI. In comparison, FTL was just top because it was realistic.
Heck yeah.
So yes, it cost $500,000 for sure or more. Actually, a lot more, I think. Millions of dollars.
We were shocked. We did it.
Movie.
We did an episode. So if you guys are curious, just go down to our back catalog and find a Space Sweeper episode that we did. But that, in retrospect, I remember recording that episode. We were actually shocked that the movie cost so low for the amount of special effects that film had. Well, this film actually, when I actually find out about this, it actually is a lot more shocking to me, because the quality, like Ray said at the beginning on this episode, is on par to ILM. And this is how much it costs. It's amazing to me that this could be done, and so good.
Well, thank you. No, thank you. Really appreciate it. Yeah, certainly we're very proud of it. And, the artists that worked on this, some of them have been involved. One of them was one of the ship modelers for The Expanse. One of them was from this show. So it's definitely a group of experienced people.
It'd have to be.
Yeah, that were involved. And part of that was because we'd all worked together for a long time, and I'm like, guys, we need to try to make something on our own. And that's where this came from. Yeah. Because we've spent so much time, I've been involved, with, somewhere over 80 different television shows and films where I have been involved with the visual effects, creating them, running the teams, figuring out all that kind of stuff. And so the idea was we wanted to take that experience and see what we could do on our own and then go from there. And so for me, that's actually sent me in a new trajectory of really wanting to spend more time, creating my own projects and writing and directing them. So, yeah.
I'm not a visual effects artist or CGI animator or anything like that, but just there's your eyes tell you whether or not you can take what you see as possible or not. That people talk about the uncanny valley for characters, but there's an uncanny valley for pretty much everything in special effects. And if you go back to the 90s and look at sort of like backdrops and ship contours and things like that, you can see that the model is there, but the shadows aren't right, or the depth is missing. This is something about it that doesn't look quite right. And I look for that because I'm a bit of a stickler for special effects. And I know, I give the ones that don't do a particularly good job of it a little bit of a hard time. I don't like lambast them or anything, but the ones that get it right, like FTL, I'll sit there and watch it and pause it and just look at it and just go, wow. And some of the views, especially when you get a harsh lighting, like from at the end when the ship is damaged and you've got the harsh light coming from the neutron star and it's washing out all the surfaces, but then you've got the really dark shadows underneath where the light isn't hitting directly. And it just looks like
Oh, that's great. There's a lot of effort there. We studied a lot of, because that's the reality. There's no ambient light in space unless you're very close to something that's emitting that light. So those contrasts between the brights and the darks and the lights and the shadows, and that was really important to try to pull off for us. Yeah.
Well, I think you pulled it off really well.
Oh, thank you.
Because I couldn't fault any of it. And oftentimes, because I have a trained eye to look for these things, it'll pull me out of the story if it doesn't look right. I'll be like, and I'll be focusing on that, not focusing on the story. It was just so good that I could just sit back and go, yep, this is totally working for me.
Oh, that's great.
So it's got that level of enjoyment where you just it's not that you want to fault it, but it's just your eyeballs are happy.
Yeah.
So
happy eyeballs are good eyeballs.
And there's something to be said, because and this is more toward our listeners. If you have listened to our show long enough, you know that I am the kind of a glass half full kind of guy. So I'm looking for the butterflies and the rainbows and the happy endings in the story.
Robert was at the end of the movie like, oh, he's back as an alien, but that's okay. He's back. He's back.
I don't care how, but he's back. Then we have our mad scientist. That he's more into the how realistic is this. And then we have our Captain Chaos that doesn't like campy. So
I didn't feel it was campy.
So this is the point that I'm trying to make. I mean, for all of you listeners out there, whenever we have an episode, there's most likely we are going to disagree on what we're covering, and this is kind of one of those few moments where we all kind of agree. What do you guys think about that statement?
Well, we all have our different takes. Like, I look at it from a scientific point of view, and Robert looks at it from sort of like comparing it to all the trillions of other sci-fi properties that he watches.
Emotional,
yeah, and he gets emotional about it. Yeah. And then Captain Chaos is just like, is it campy? Is it not campy?
I like to look at it more from a philosophical.
I love campy, man. I'm sorry. But yeah, we are kind of like, and at least this is my perspective in hearing you guys talk about this. We have our own perspectives and all experiences watching this film. But it's kind of like on the agreement side for all three of us, which is not something that is very common for us. And not that is good or bad. I mean, you guys have always heard me say that's what really calls a good conversation. It's okay to disagree. I mean, I disagree. If you hear our season 1, you hear a lot of disagreements between me and Captain Chaos.
I mean, we'll still be friends even though you think that flat is Earth. The Earth is flat.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the point that I'm trying to make. That it's kind of like one of the few times where we can come sit down and agree on most of the topics. So, what is your overall thought on? And I guess this goes to Captain Chaos and our mad scientist. What is your overall thought on the film? When I guess this is more towards our mad scientist that it is for Captain Chaos, because how many times have you seen this film yet?
Me?
Huh?
Twice, man. And I have a lot of things about it that I like.
I mean, I seen it I can't remember how many times, but it's been multiple times. Ray, how many times have you seen it? Can you recall, or just like me that you?
I think it's probably about 6 by now.
Maybe 6 by now.
I think you've watched more than I have. I appreciate that.
Well, if you add up all the little bits that you've probably watched over and over again, true. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, had I come to add, and I understand how he feels overly critical of his own work.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've done that myself, and anybody that does some kind of art,
Yeah.
bad to themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
They
it's
understand the
pretty
movie.
hard. It's pretty
Movie.
hard afterwards. I just want to move on to the next thing. But yeah.
aside from my editing on this show, I try not to, because every time I do, I hate my own voice. So yes,
I know a lot of filmmakers that will not watch their own films. They'll make them and they'll never watch them. So I understand that more now.
That's why people that cook and
I'm-
don't eat what they offer you when they cook.
I'm an unpublished writer, and I tend to take more of the J.R.R. Tolkien perspective, and I don't want to let anything go because it's never good enough. So,
Right. Yeah. Well, what's that great quote? Is the perfect is the enemy of the good. If you never get it out there. With FTL, that was the thing. Like, it is far from perfect. It is significantly imperfect, but it was still time to put it out there and see what happened. I would remake it a dozen times and try to make it better every time. Otherwise, it can certainly be improved.
Well, get one of those Elon Musk spacesuits, and I think you'll be a long way towards solving at least one problem.
Sounds good.
No, and I believe Adam there, because like the more that you do something, the more you master that skill. So I'm sure that you're a lot better now in your skills as a CGI animator than before.
Yeah,
a lot more tricks and better things now.
Absolutely. For me, especially with the storytelling aspects, like the writing and directing, I think I'm certainly improving. And with this feature that I'm doing right now, I feel like it's certainly a step up from FTL, like learning how to work with actors, learning how to look at performance and try to find your way through all of those kinds of things has been some of the most challenging stuff for me. But I love that and learning about that and trying to get better every time. So yeah, every time you do something, as you said, right, you find ways to improve, and but then it becomes harder to look back at your previous work as well. So.
Yeah. You become more overly critical of your own.
Exactly.
Work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Gio, you agree with this, but I definitely I understand that. If you put it in perspective, I guess from our perspective on the first episode on
yes,
I totally hate it. I just hate that episode. But it's within the top most downloaded episodes.
Yeah,
and
I liked it.
I
quality things that we were learning with equipment and better grades.
I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea. So that's the reason why I hated it.
But now we do.
Awesome. I guess before we move on, I wanted to ask the team, how do you feel about, and this might be a question just from my own perspective, but I still like to hear your thoughts. How do you like the emotional aspect of the film? And let me bring it into context. And this is a conversation that I had when I was watching this film with Gio. Especially one scene that I can call out is the scene where he's remembering the conversation that I had, I believe was the previous day to the mission with his wife, and that emotional connection. As you all know, I'm an empath, so that's the reason why I want to call it out and see if you guys felt the same thing that I did. But I can definitely understood that scene and the emotional connection that wife had. That you're having those missions. You don't know when your last mission will be. So in essence, you're kind of saying your goodbyes just in case. And that worry that she had that this would be the very last time that she would see the husband. Do you guys, how do you feel about that? And that's just a sample, right? The whole movie.
Short and fast, since we don't want to delay Adam too. But here's the thing, like I think that scene was well made, good acting and good composition. So you see the whole family together. It makes you feel that wholesomeness when you see the scene, So he did convey a lot of good messages in there with that scene and with the whole movie.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was certainly the hardest stuff for me to try to pull off with this film. And I've really tried to delve into that more with my next project, where I'm really spending a lot of time with the emotional resonance, the emotional arcs, how the characters relate to each other. That's tricky stuff. And with FTL, it wasn't that it was an afterthought, because that was really there had to be an emotional driver for it to work for me. But I thought the actors did a great job with it, and we had a lot of fun shooting it, and they enjoyed it. There was some funny stuff going on that day, and never have a kid in one of your first films. That was something I learned because he was great, he was really good, but their attention spans aren't super long.
Yeah.
So, there's an old adage about never put kids and animals in movies, and I almost had a dog in this as well. So it's that. Yeah.
You dodged half a bullet. You got the other half.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, from a writing perspective, from a scientific logic perspective, you don't send a married man with a kid as a test pilot. You use young people who don't have attachments.
Right.
And that was the first thing that leapt out to me. And then I went, no, but this story would just lose its meaning if there wasn't people waiting for him at home.
Yeah, it would be. It wouldn't work as this story. But to that point as well, I had written a feature film draft of this story, and I removed the kid, partly for that reason. And then, interestingly, I was speaking with a manager in Los Angeles who said, well, no, you need the kid. Like everybody wanted the kid at that point. So I've wavered on that, because I agree with you. Again, it's sort of like, just like a test pilot would be very much trained to put his or her helmet on in case of emergency, and frankly, for the whole ride.
Exactly.
So would they enlist someone that didn't have necessarily those attachments, but the emotional resonance was important to sort of try to. Yeah.
Awesome.
You in the end, you have to make the story mean something to the viewer. I mean,
That's
just some random kid who gets lost in space. It's like, yes, so what?
Yeah, right. A little trick.
But a family man with a kid and a worried wife, and he promises to come back, and then he gets stranded out in space. It's like, well, these aliens have picked him up. What are they gonna get from their scan of him before he disappears in the little particles? And that is that the one thing that he really wants is to go home to see his family, and that's what they let him do. And it's part of the intrinsic circular nature of the story that his greatest desire is to get home. Right. And if he doesn't have a reason, the story doesn't have that circular meaning anymore. So
you got it. Yeah.
You're kind of a slave to the requirements of the story in putting in the character as he was in the story. So
that's 100% it. Absolutely.
Awesome.
And I mean, people love science, and we love science fiction, but it's not a human story unless there's humans in it with a human.
Well, that's right. When you hear about science fiction, especially in filmmaking, and you talk about world building and wanting to see all of this great stuff, that's all great, but you need to see it through the eyes of the characters. You can't just see it as the viewer. Unless you're being taken through the story through the lens of the people that are experiencing it, it will have no meaning. And that's so important. Yeah.
And it's the character's experience and their emotions they're feeling as they're experiencing it that colors the story and,
that's right.
and gives emotional hints to the viewer. So you need that as well.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so before we move on to our next segment, I really want to thank Mr. Adam Stern for being on our show. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I hope that you enjoy the type of conversations that we do in this show. We are beyond ecstatic and happy that you're able to be part of this conversation. And at least to us, we rarely get a chance to have this kind of conversations with the creator of the story. And this is what's kind of happened. So thank you so much. And not only from the bottom of our hearts, but from the bottom of the hearts of all our listeners. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's truly a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoy, I have few opportunities to have these kinds of discussions. So, and not just needing to be about my own work. So I do really appreciate it. I love this stuff. I love talking about it. So thank you again for inviting me. It's been great fun.
Awesome. And I hope that you like us enough that you can come back. We'll definitely will like you to come back to talk about the film that it's coming up next year, hopefully.
I love the banner. That's great.
Well,
Yes,
when it
that's
releases?
the plan. Yeah, next year is the plan. It will hopefully be in some combination of theaters and streaming and all sorts of stuff at some time next year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your time, and hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Take care.
So let's see. So we have our next segment. Are we ready for it?
Yeah.
We were born ready, weren't we?
Are we ready?
But I'm going to rely a bit on you.
Okay, that's fine.
Ooh.
The science in sci-fi.
Okay, so this is the part of the show where we tell you the science behind the story that we just spoke about. And oh boy.
You wouldn't think 15 minutes would have that much stuff.
15 minutes, and there's so much. I mean, I was showing Gio our notes.
Bro, I have more things like we could have talked to, but like our guest had to go. So, but if no, bro, would I keep asking him more things that I like about the movie? You know?
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
understand. I understand. We only have a limited amount of
That's how
time,
good it
so.
was.
But we really, really appreciate it. I was really ecstatic when he said yes to agreeing being on our episode. So this for 15 minutes, oh my God, this film just talked so many things and not at the same time. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it covers warp drives, very obviously. It covers wormholes. It covers quantum entanglement, quantum theory, time dilation, nuclear fusion. I mean, where do we start?
It covers level 4 advanced civilizations and Dyson rings and, you know.
Oh my God.
All sorts of stuff.
So, I guess I'm going to start by giving a little observation on the film. For all of you who are not aware, which I like to think you are if you listen to the show, FTL stands for faster than light travel. So there's multiple ways that faster than travel is accomplished, mostly on science fiction. But some of those are actually being researched as being science fact. Not necessarily a reality today, but you basically on the work being done, you could definitely see how plausible those technologies could be. One of the technologies is obviously warp drive, associated with the Alcubierre drive. There's hyperspace, there's wormhole, there's jump drive, and there's quantum. Now, I'm going to start with quantum. It's very fascinating to me because if you, for example, look from the computational side of quantum theory, not sure if you understand what that is, but in computing, what makes the computer what it is today is its logic gates, right? So you have a logic gate that gives you a 0 and a 1. So, you combine those and it gives you the bit, the byte, and, so forth and so on. So on a computer, you could either be a 0 or a 1. And again, I'm talking very, very deep into the, this is the basis of what a programming is, what an operating system is. It's the basis for everything on a typical computer. So it goes down to two possible states, a 0 or a 1. So in quantum, you could have a 0, a 1, and a quantum state. So there's so many possible scenarios that could happen from that type of combination, to the fact where the computation potential for a quantum computer is so vast, and why companies like IBM and Google, they are experimenting with a quantum computer, which, by the way, you could actually get entry that they allow you to use those computers now if you go in and sign up through their site. It is so like far-fetched, and in the capacity of these computers to do, all the computation that they are in theory able to do. Now, when you sign up for these services, well, actually, I wouldn't call it a services. It's kind of like a beta where you go in and sign up, and you can use the computer. Now, many people think, oh yeah, we're gonna be using a quantum computer. Well, yeah and no, because all you can test right now is logic gates. So you can go and do kind of programming that requires logic gates, and that's how you pretty much can build upon. And of course, these companies are very interested to see on the things that you might come up with, as far as programming with logic gates. And like we have heard, you have heard us in previous episodes, we say that we are on the quantum infancy. So if you take that in perspective, that helps you understand the capacity that quantum computer has. So if you take the quantum theory, and you combine everything that it is about the quantum, one of the things that I see within this film is a possibility within the quantum realm, where not only you have a quantum computer calculating like tremendous speeds, and doing all this computational work in just a matter of milliseconds or faster, but you could actually have that connected to a quantum network that would transfer that information to and from vast amount of space. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, I'm sure you are, but what is your, I'd like to hear your perspective, especially Ray or Captain Chaos, about that statement that I made about the quantum computing and quantum entanglement theory.
What do you reckon, Gia? I'll let you go first.
We kind of talked about this when we were actually watching this film.
Gio, you're silent. It's a silent movie suddenly.
Uh-oh. Is it a good thing?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
There you go. I was saying that we were talking about this actually when we were watching the movie about being actually interplanetary communication systems or longer distance. I think that it will be able to communicate your lifetime in another galaxy. Do you think?
Well, in theory, that is a possibility.
Yes.
Not only that,
How
but
far
travel.
could that go? Anywhere, right?
Yeah, and travel too.
Yes.
So this is, at least to me, this is what fascinates me about quantum theory, is the possibility of using that theory in multiple applications. So we're using it here for in our, obviously in our thought experiment. We're using it for computing power, we're using it for communication, and we're using it for travel.
Yeah. Now, would you agree? I think that once we harness that power, we will become part of that intergalactic alliance. Star Trek shit, real life. Right?
Well, we are very far away from it, but I kind of
If we
have
can
to
travel
agree.
to anywhere virtually, thanks to quantum mechanics being mastered already,
the
we're gonna
the
encounter something
biggest
for sure.
the biggest problem that humanity faces, well, there's two. The first one is getting somewhere in this massive amount of space that the galaxy occupies.
But if we can travel
Getting there.
quantum mechanics,
So we're looking. The speed of light is a heck of a barrier, and there's got to be a way to circumvent it if we're ever going to have a diaspora and have humanity, move out across
weird,
the
right?
galaxy. And we kind of need to do that because we're not very good at looking after the rocks that we live on. So it would behoove us to work out how, beyond generational ships, to get the hell off of Earth and out of the solar system, so that if something horrible happens. And let's be serious here for a moment. Pretty fucking nasty things happen every now and again in space, which will basically sterilize star systems. All right, you have supernova go off, or you have the creation of neutron stars. That shit is deadly for hundreds of light years in every direction. Right, the radiation bursts are just so epic that it kills everything. Right, if there was a ship going past, if there was planets in the way, they'd just all be sterilized. Everything would die.
What do you think if we would master technology to deflect completely radiation?
Wow, that's a whole nother story. And again, these are the sorts of things that we don't know how we're going to do it, but we can see that we really kind of need to know how to do it if we want to, have a civilization that lasts more than a few hundred years, a few thousand years. Because the dinosaurs would still be here if it wasn't for that ruddy great rock.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were doing fine. They lasted a heck of a lot longer than we have so far. Humanity as something recognizable has only been kicking around for about 1 million years, which is a drop in the ocean compared to the what was it, 242 million years that the dinosaurs were considered to
I guess something
exist.
interesting to ask you too. Do you guys believe in ancient advanced civilizations?
That is a question that is still out.
Yeah.
It's still out because
waiting to see the definitive.
There is a theory that says there is a span where civilization, from the moment the civilization is born to the moment the civilization dies, and there could be a span in between civilizations, or they could be in the same span, but maybe not technologically advanced enough to travel because the other one is so far away from the other. There's so many variables.
What about more advanced than what we are now when they destroy themselves?
Exactly. That's one of the theories that I have read about, and that's the reason why I said about the span where from the moment they're born basically to the moment that civilization dies. Maybe they obviously there's there is also the school of thought that talks about maybe a civilization growing so fast that they just go beyond the physical, and that's the reason why we might not be able to detect them. Maybe they're watching us right now, and they choose not to make themselves available. And then there's another topic that we have discussed, me and Gio, on previous episodes, where we have those beings that are outside our three-dimensional space.
Yeah.
So there's so many, and this is the reason why I said the school is still out, because none of these theories are proven. They're just in theories. So, what do you think? I mean, do you have anything to add to that, Ray?
Well, I was just getting back to the points that we wanted off on that I was trying to cover. So there's certain issues that we have to overcome to be a galaxy spanning species. The first one is getting there, and FTL talks about the very first sort of vestiges of finding a way to cheat the limitations of light speed. And even if we could get up to light speed, which would take a huge amount of energy as far as we know at this stage, it's not viable to travel around at light speed, because if you run into something at light speed, you get atomized. So you really need to find a way to circumvent the distance, and all the theories about folding space, wormholes, warp bubbles, and all that sort of thing. Humanity generally finds a way. We have science for a reason. We come up with theories and we test them, and a lot of the times they go nowhere, but sometimes we find ways to make them happen. And whether or not that's fate, or maybe those fourth or fifth or sixth or however n-dimensional beings are feeding us information into our dreams so that we can become a more advanced species, because we may not be able to work it out for ourselves. Who knows what the actual way that we're discovering these things are, but we are discovering them slowly. And go back a couple of centuries, and flying to the moon was considered a load of bullshit and would never happen. And we did that just before I was born. And I'm not a young man anymore. So, these things have happened, and now they're history, and we're attempting to do them again. I think that humanity's only real limitation is time and effort and the money to experiment to the point where we work out how the hell to do the things we want to do. Because I kind of feel like if we can think of it, we can make it happen. Yeah. It's this whole idea, will, and creation sort of paradigm that humanity seems to be pretty damn good at. Sometimes for good and sometimes for ill, but we find ways to improve things and do more. And it really is one of our strengths. And the things that we have to overcome is getting there. So the galaxy is really big. As Douglas Adams said, space is big, really big. It might seem like a long way down to the corner store, but that's just peanuts to space. You are, that's the massivest understatement that there ever was. Getting anywhere functional in space, like from between star systems, is a huge amount of distance that we have to cover, and finding a way to do that effectively at a reasonable price point, so that it can be a regular thing, is going to be a real trick. And this movie theorizes a method of doing that. It leans into the Alchieri drive, which is a theory that they're working on turning to a reality at the moment. Getting there is half the battle. And then once people are out there, the distances are also a problem for communication, because our current communication is also limited by the speed of light. I'm sitting here talking to people who are on the other side of the planet Earth from me, which is pretty damn amazing. It wasn't something that could be done 100 years ago particularly easily, and 150 years ago it was completely impossible. So these things go from impossibilities to a reality to an everyday occurrence. We record these things once or twice a week. I'm on the internet talking to people on the other side of the world that I've never met, who are good friends of mine. I've never met them face to face, but I've spent so much time talking with them, and we have a distance social network that I feel like, if I could get over to Florida, I'd catch up with you guys, we'd have beers, and it'd be like we went to school together. You get that close, even if you've never met, because we are on the opposite sides of a planet.
Yes.
But we are here talking and communicating in very nearly real time. Now, it's not quite real time. It takes, I think it's a 20th of a second.
And for Geo, it's like 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's because he's got that computer that slows everything down. But we can communicate around the planet in a 20th of a second, not including, you know, the conversion from audio to digital, and then that going through into the network, crossing the network, you know, getting through hubs that have got a lot of traffic going through them, so there can be slowdowns there. But theoretically, it's about 1/20th of a second for information from my computer to get to one of your computers, so you can then it can be converted back into audio and you can hear me.
You forgot meters to washing machines?
Yeah, that's right too. There's got to be a conversion in there. But all that aside, that's on the distance of around the curve of a planet, which, you know, is you know, one Earth-size planet. I can't tell you, sorry, how many washing machines that is, but we know that that's 1/20th of a second. Now, when you look at the speed of light and the distance between the sun and the Earth, that's 8 minutes, just between the sun and the Earth. And obviously other star systems are many times that distance away. So real-time communication is using the speed of light is theoretically impossible, and functionally impossible, because light just can't travel that fast, because all electromagnetic radiation travels at the speed of light. So
I want to bring that to perspective before you continue. For all of you out there who are not familiar, speed of light needs to be measured in a vacuum. Because you know, if you're not measuring in a vacuum, then you have to account for, you know, like pressure and air and all that stuff that slows down.
Light scatters off gas particles.
Exactly. So when you measure the speed of light in a vacuum, and I kind of try to convert it here to a way that you can kind of make sense, because the numbers are astronomical, obviously. So we're talking about 671 million miles per hour. I won that car.
Well, you wouldn't want to slam on the brakes in that car.
Exactly. So we have, for example, from Earth to Alpha Centauri, we're talking about 4.367 light years distance. And for all of you Star Trek fans out there, that is actually 1.3020 parsecs. So, I mean, when you put that into perspective, it's mind-boggling. And another thing that I had to add to that, Ray, when you were mentioning, which I think is also another thing that it's making it harder for us to be able to travel, you know, on that realm or that possibility of FTLs, is the fact that, you know, scientists know that time and space is one thing, because of the mathematics and all that, you know, all the experiments and the theories and all the stuff that has been done. For a normal human being, that's hard to imagine. Because we are third-dimensional beings, we are like bound to think that space and time are two separate things. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, when you're traveling at that kind of speed, you have also the issue of time dilation. So if you want to make an effective mode of travel, you need to be able to also play with time. Otherwise, when you come back to Earth, you're going to meet your progenitors, your great grandkid, because so much time has passed on Earth when it might have been just a few days for you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know, you know, I wanted to bring that up and within your conversation, Ray, because I'm very curious to think, you know, to hear what you think about that, because I strongly feel that this is one thing that you add to the reason why we haven't or could not yet achieve FTL?
Well, you're talking about being constrained by the speed of light and moving at relativistic speeds in real space, which is, what we're limited to at the moment. And presuming that we could actually get up to that speed, you would have all this problem with time dilation. That is why we need to cheat and circumvent it so that we don't have that problem, because it will be a huge problem. The people you leave behind will die, and you will not age nearly as quickly as they will. And going close to a black hole can cause all sorts of other time dilation problems as well, because space-time is being stretched out near an event horizon. But the issue needs to be circumvented in a way that we can get around traveling at relativistic speeds by, hopping across space rather than traveling through it, either through wormholes or, folding space or what have you, to get around these whole problems of actually doing the traveling. And that's sort of where we're headed, because trying to do it the old-fashioned way, just getting faster and faster until you hit a limit, isn't going to really help us all that much, energy-wise, coming into contact with solid objects and getting atomized-wise, and so forth. So it's kind of necessary for us to find a way around that. I hope they do find a way around that, because otherwise it's going to be a very tricky situation in a diaspora and travel. You basically wouldn't want to travel unless you were taking all the important people in your life with you, because you would never see them again otherwise. But presuming we can get there in one piece and we don't have these relativistic time-space problems, the next thing becomes communications, because communications is also limited to light speed. And as we've said, it's 8 minutes between Earth and the Sun, and to communicate to Mars, it's 3 minutes or more, because Mars gets closer and further away depending on where we are in our orbit and where it is in its orbit. So, the best we'd likely have is 3 minutes, and the worst is probably you can't communicate at all because you're on opposite sides of the Sun, and the Sun says no. So there will be blackout periods between Earth and a Mars colony, unless we circumvent that problem as well and cheat. Now, we've got a better handle on that than we do on the travel part, and that is linked particles, subatomic particles. So the idea is that we find a way to digitize. Well, we know how to digitize information. We're doing it right now in this podcast. But you digitize information, you feed it into one particle, and the other particle reacts in the same way, and then you read the second particle and turn the changes in that particle back into digital information, and there you have interstellar communications at instantaneous speeds from anywhere in the galaxy to anywhere else, because the two particles are linked, and it doesn't matter how far apart they are, they react to each other. That is the theory, and it's been shown to, at least under certain circumstances, be functional in practice. But the whole point of the matter is you've got to get the particles to the two places that you want them for the communication to go ahead. So you've got to actually take the second of the matched particles to the place where you want the communication to happen. And that's what happens in FTL. They drop off a satellite, which is a linked particle satellite. So there's a particle on that satellite and there's a particle back at base on Earth, and the two of them communicate, and they have instantaneous communications rather than waiting for light speed to do its thing. And I found that really, really hopeful, actually, that one will probably be a reality before we manage to circumvent light speed.
Yeah. So we're going through all the types of FTLs that we can find. We kind of briefly talked about quantum and glossed over warp drive, which is basically what we can see an example of in this film. And not sure if you're familiar with it, but the Alcubierre drive was a concept proposed by physicist Miguel Alcubierre. I can't remember which Mexican university he was in, but it was in 1994. And we talked about this in previous episode. It talks about the possibility of achieving faster than light travel by expanding and contracting space around the ship in a bubble. So in essence, one explanation that I found a little helpful is if you imagine a surfer, the wave behind him grows, pushing his surfboard forward. The water in front of them goes down, also making the surfboard going forward, while the surfer itself is not technically moving, and that's the reason why you can see them standing. It's kind of not an exact, but it's the best way that I can explain how warp technology works. There's a bubble created that it contracts the space in front and expands the space behind, and therefore is using space-time to push the ship forward. And this is why, if you watch many of those technologies, like in science fiction, like the best example that you can see is Star Trek, or this film that we watched today. You see that no one wears seat belts, and when the ship reaches its destination, there's not that jerking forward that you see with acceleration, deceleration. You might see the ship and Star Trek moving forward, but only because they're also using the impulse drive to move forward into space. But technically, this film, in my opinion, gives you the best representation, because when you see the launch shot stop, it's just a dead stop. There's no moving forward in space because it was being transferred using the space-time. They're kind of like moving it forward. So that's basically what a warp drive is, which is, one of the most feasible, most plausible technologies for FTL currently. And one of the ones that gets me really excited, if you have heard me talk about this before, when Mr. Alcubierre in 1994 proposed the theory, it actually proposed the energy needed was the entire universe, which you would say, okay, that's impossible. No, that's plausible, because it proves. Now, why I get excited, not because of that statement. It's just that the following research, and honestly, I can't remember. It was a group of people. It was a group of scientists, and I think it was two scientists. I can't remember what university it was. They did a follow-up to Mr. Alcubierre's research, and they worked the theory, the formula, to where they were able to get the power consumption down to a solar system. If you think about it, I mean, it's still out there, right? Your brain doesn't really compute, but just think about it from perspective. We went from the entire universe all the way to a solar system. To me, that's a huge improvement.
Didn't they then go to the Jupiter size of?
I was going to get to that. There was another scientist. God, I wish I would have researched that and tell you who and where, because I really like to give credit. But this person was able to work upon the work from these other two scientists, and they got it down to the power of Jupiter. Now I'm getting excited. So we went from the entire universe to a solar system to a single planet. And
it's a big planet.
It's a big planet. Yeah. So it's still out there, right? It's still plausible, but it's not, if you put it in comparison, how the entire galaxy would be impossible. Now, I believe that's when NASA took over. Was it Dr. Smith? I think I'm sorry if I got this wrong, but they actually took the research and they're conducting research right now on NASA. They haven't really, but you know how it is. You know that they do the experiments, and if they're not ready, they're not going to tell you much. But I'm actually reading up and following up on this on the research for NASA, where they're actually doing experiments on this. And I remember the last thing that I actually saw as a result from NASA's research on this. It's actually, Gio, I don't know if you remember those graphs that I showed you. Those are actually from NASA. So that they're actually doing some computer models. And they show a possibility of this technology, being more useful. However, and I don't know if you read this, Ray, or not. The portion that is getting everybody stuck right now is the front portion of the bubble. And this is the portion that contracts the space in front. I guess you could do it just expanding the space behind you and just work, it'd be a little slower. However, if I understand this correctly, they are needing, is it dark matter? I think it was dark matter, which is something we can't produce.
Yeah.
So right now they're working on that. I think that's in part some of the research that is being done by the Hadron Collider and try to produce something. Is it dark particle? I always.
Well, the dark particle, dark energy is what supposedly keep things as they are on the void of space.
Yeah. So, overall, that is actually what's needed. Part of what needed for FTL. I mean, not for FTL, for warp drive, the Alcubierre drive. And they're doing some more research on it. So I believe that once that is achieved, then we can actually have some prototypes built, and things will be promising. As it is right now, it's actually was holding up not the research, but was holding up the technology from becoming a reality.
To go anywhere.
Have you read about that, Ray? I mean, as far as you know.
No, I haven't really looked into the Alcubierre drive in any great detail. It sounds like something interesting. I do know that they produced a particle of antimatter at CERN.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know where they've got to with dark matter.
Yeah, I can't, and I might be wrong here. I don't know why I'm mixing both in my head. They're not the same. So they're definitely not the same. But they did. I believe there's dark energy. Because they need a way to contract the space in front, and that's what's holding them back. And I guess I'll research and probably do a little bit more of an update for you guys. But it's one of those, and I understand. I mean, dark, it confuses everybody. You think that it's the same thing, and it's not. So the other one, the other FTL that we see in science fiction is jump drive. There's basically jump drives work by instantaneously transporting a ship from one point in space to another. That it's right now a work of science fiction. you kind of would see something like from the perspective of from the outside perspective of someone that is not traveling inside a warp bubble. Warp drive travel could seem to be like a jump drive where you're in one space, you disappear, and all of a sudden you appear in another space. However, it's not the same thing. It's right now. It's just I don't think there's even research on it. It's just a product of science fiction, but many people attribute that to like warp travel. We talked about wormholes. That's another mode of FTL. Ray, how much do you know about wormholes? I know I was having a conversation with Gio, and I want Gio to have a different perspective on an explanation of what a wormhole is, and then I'll tell you why I envision a wormhole to be. Which again, that might not necessarily be the truth because no one has seen one. And on top of that, I'm not a scientist specialized in wormholes or in the theories of wormholes, so it might be. But I'm kind of curious to not only hear your perspective for Gio's benefit, because he already heard mine, which I'm going to say mine, but also get your opinion on my perspective on it.
Well, rather than try and come up with something off the bat, I just Googled wormhole, and according to Google, it's an Einstein-Rosen bridge, which the term up for a wormhole, Einstein-Rosen bridge, which I had heard before, but wasn't in the forefront of my memory. But it's currently a hypothetical structure connecting disparate points in space-time.
Okay.
Now, why we think they exist is because of a special solution of the Einstein field equations. So basically, physics says this could possibly exist, and that's why it's being followed up as a possibility for intersystem travel, or long distance travel in space.
So they haven't been really seen ever, like black holes.
No.
Well, you can't really see a black hole either. You can see.
Oh, you can see the event horizon on it.
Yeah. But you can't actually see the black hole.
So, Gio, you hear Ray's perspective on it. Does it helps you bring a more complete understanding of it? I'm going to say my perspective in a minute, but
yes, but it brings us to the discussion that we were having earlier.
Okay.
That the second time that he got into that wormhole, right?
Well, we were talking about the wormhole, how he, I guess the aliens used the wormhole to bring him to. No, he wasn't in a wormhole when the FTL drive broke. That wasn't a wormhole. That's
actually, it was right before. It was beeping, beep, beep.
Yeah, but
beep,
that's not a wormhole. That is the FTL malfunctioning. What we're talking about is at the end of the film, when the aliens travel back to Earth to
the anomaly that appeared near the ISS.
I'm sorry?
And then an anomaly appeared 2 kilometers from the ISS, which I thought was a little close. But perhaps they were using where he started from as a grid reference to take him home. And that's where he activated the engines of the long shot. So that's where they brought him back. But it was 2 kilometers from the ISS where they opened up a wormhole and came out in their little crystalline shippy thingies or whatever those things were.
But let me make this clear to just confirm for you too, that these aliens use the same mode of transportation that he used to get there.
No.
They didn't came through the same means that he went there. He went to Mars.
No,
with a computer drive,
no.
but in space.
They use a wormhole.
And what is the computer using?
The Alcubierre is using warp. Basically, it's warping space around and using
Warping.
space, warping space. So here's my take on the wormhole. It obviously is a theory, just like Ray mentioned. It's just the formulas allow for that to exist, so it must exist, and people are dedicating some time and see what is actually true. But a wormhole is a tunnel-like structure that connects two different points in space. It is, if it were possible, right? Because we don't know, no one has seen one. There's no proof. If it were possible to travel through a wormhole, it would allow for travel between 2 points of space that are very, very far apart, without the need for traveling long distances. And the perspective that I see, if I were to travel through a wormhole, to me, it would be a door. So I can.
You think
I can
that
see.
you will feel the distance between the entrance and the out?
Well,
and the exit?
Hear what I'm going to say, because you answered before I even said what I was going to say, and this is going to answer your question. When you open up a door and you go from your room to the living room, right?
That's what's gonna be.
That's exactly what's going to be. You could actually look through the wormhole and you see the other part where it's going to take you. So when you walk through,
Noise.
You're in the other place. You're just there. Another thing that I envision, and again, all the stuff that I'm saying, I could be completely wrong, right?
Bro, we've seen this in Cowboy Bebop.
So
the gates that they had to go through before they go inside the earth.
Stargate.
Stargate. Definitely.
They're in hyperspace.
That is a wormhole. Stargate is a wormhole. Well, it's a creation of a wormhole.
Yeah.
So now, however, the way that I envision a wormhole looking like, and I don't know if you guys had time to think about this, or maybe I'm completely wrong in this. I see a wormhole looking like a sphere, where you can enter that sphere from any point. You can go from the bottom, from the top, from the side, from the left, from the right. It kind of like what a black hole is, right? Kind of, not the same thing. It's not the same thing. Just want to make sure that that's clear.
It doesn't have a gravity.
And you just walk through it, and you're just there in the other sphere.
Am I correct, Robert? It doesn't have gravity.
I don't think so. I never really thought about answering, questioning.
It shouldn't, if not. There's a paradox of.
Well, let me make this point.
It will be like a black hole.
If the wormhole, the other wormhole, let's call wormhole A, point B, right? If the wormholes are within an atmosphere, which I don't know how plausible that is, right? Then yes, it would have the gravity of whatever body that is on top of.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking a lot of crap here, and I want to hear
we gotta
from.
get a custom located wormhole on the other side with our calculations and shit.
I want to hear Ray.
Get us like in deep space, so there's nothing harmful around.
I want to hear Ray and calling me out on this, because
just keep in mind that I'm a biologist, not a physicist. So
no,
hyperspace.
I know, but you have a tendency to be more. I mean, I'm not saying that this is your field of study, obviously, but you have a tendency to putting me in my place whenever I'm
Cinderella.
Look, if there's information which clarifies what you're saying, I will pass it along.
The astronaut lost his boot, and another astronaut found it, and he fit. It was perfect. Cinderella face.
So it's saying here that wormholes are allowed to exist in the math of general relativity, which is our best description of the universe. Now, as I've said before in multiple pods, that science is not absolute, and we don't know everything yet.
Yeah.
We have an understanding, which is how far we've gotten, and that is going to change. It's going to always continue to change. So,
do you think that we'll ever get to the point that we know everything there is to be known?
Mm-mm.
Well, if you believe Douglas Adams, the moment we start to really understand the universe, will become infinitely more complex, just despite us. So I wouldn't put it past the universe to do that, really. Going on how some of my weeks go. But
yeah, no, I agree with you, Ray. I think the more questions we get answered, the more questions we get.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like that. It's one of those things where the more you know you don't know.
Yes.
So there's not, that point doesn't exist.
Possibly not.
I don't think so. I mean, and considering that we are, for the most part, asking the right questions, and that's also take a big part of understanding, the concept.
That encapsulates the whole concept of the infinite.
So if we are able to answer, if we are able to ask the right questions, that would be amazing. However, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
So, and to bring our guest to my last point, I'm sorry, did we have anything more to add? I don't know if I cut it.
Well, not being a physicist, no. I'd have to go and spend about 3 days reading to get a grasp on it. But
yeah, no one here is. So, so the last one, and again, this is just a collection of FTL that I have known not only through reading science but science fiction. The last one in my list is hyperspace, and you probably are familiar with this if you are a Star Wars fan. And hyperspace, some theoretical physics have explored the idea of extra dimension beyond the three spatial dimensions. So we have length, width, and height, and one time dimension that that we're familiar with. In string theory, and if you heard me talk about this before, you know that I'm, although I'm not a scientist, I am more of a quantum. I like the quantum theory more than I like the string theory. But in string theory, there are 10 or 11 dimensions, some of which are curled up and too small to be observed. So hyperspace, in theory, is kind of like using the dimensions to travel. And let me see, how can I explain this? And we talked about previous episode about this.
They use technology to travel between dimensions.
Well, yes and no, right? So when you look at the mesh of the universe and you take in account the dimensions, there's obviously levels. So there's fourth dimensional tunnels that would come through the third dimensional plane that we exist in, right? So within the fourth, and I'm just talking about the fourth dimension. I mean, I have read about eight dimension, 10 dimensions. Like it says here, they have in theory they have discovered up to 11 dimensions. So I mean that's mind-boggling. But just to keep it in perspective, let's just talk about the fourth dimension. These objects are in the same place, yet when they cross over, or the section of them that cross over our third dimension, they could be parsecs away, like tens of thousands of parsecs away from each other. So the hyperspace, in my understanding, is the ability to use technology to not only detect where those points are, points of entry, but also detect where they end up in, and determining where you want to go. And like if I want to go from here to Alpha Centauri, which point am I going to use to cross dimension and end up in Alpha Centauri from Earth? Again, that's, although there have been some thought into hyperspace, I like to think that this is still science fiction. It's not something that, although they have really...
Why would you like to think that?
Because there haven't been any research on the possibility, or I don't think there has been any mathematical equations done, nothing in the direction of hyperspace. I actually seen a lot more in the quantum wormhole and the warp drive theories than I ever seen for hyperspace. But then again, I don't know how familiar Ray is on hyperspace, but I think this is just, at this point, I consider this more sci-fi, and I don't see there is a big, how I want to call it that, interest in the scientific community to explore this.
Well, the theory of hyperspace requires that the distances that line up with the physical reality that we exist in are shorter. So, I mean, you wouldn't expend the energy to cross into another plane of reality or layer of whatever the hell, to travel, unless there was an advantage in doing so. And the idea is that, it's a lot shorter in this hyperspace or subspace or the warp or whatever you want to call it, that would make it worth going there and traveling and then coming back out at a much further distance than you've actually physically traveled within the space that you entered into. And, we don't have any method or any results showing that these spaces actually exist. It's all theoretical. So first of all, we need to be able to find it, and then we need to be able to access it. And then it needs to have this smaller cross-section or fingerprint or whatever you want to call it than real space. So that's a lot of ifs.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that one's the least likely.
But at least if you want to take something away from this explanation, is that if you're a Star Wars fan, now the comments would make sense when you hear them saying, okay, calculating trajectory. Okay, I got it. Punch it. And now that should make a lot more sense when you're looking at hyperspace travel in Star Wars. I hope. I hope. Okay, so that concludes my list of FTLs. So I hope that you find the explanation helpful and not confusing. Do let me know what you guys think about the explanations that were given here. Anything that you guys would like to add for this segment?
I think it's pretty much been covered.
Awesome. Okay, so just remember, you could actually help the show. Not only, I suggest you guys subscribe to our show and whatever pod catcher you are maybe using. If you please go into our YouTube channel and subscribe. We definitely need the subscriptions. And remember, you can make Captain Chaos butt your canvas. Just forget that. Yeah, just don't forget that. You can take advantage of that. So if you like the show and you know someone who loves sci-fi and loves the show, please share it. You can, if you want to do a little bit more for us, you could actually go into Patreon. If you are watching our show on YouTube, you have a QR code. All you have to do is just scan that code. It takes you to the Patreon site and become a Patreon. Or you can actually buy us a coffee. Captain Chaos needs his coffee. So, help us out in there. And to continue the conversation, follow us on the Discord. Just join up our Discord. I'm sorry?
For everybody to know that they can catch us live there.
Definitely. We occasionally have some watch parties, so you can talk live with us. You can have conversations. We have a channel for mostly all the IPs. And if you find your IP is not there, or just let me know and we can make it a thing. But if you're watching on YouTube, you can scan that code, and that's actually the invite to our Discord. If you're listening to our show on a podcatcher, all these links are available in the show description. And for all of you there who are not aware, we do have a website, sciencefictionremnant.com, where I actually post articles on the blog section. And if you like to read those articles and want to know when they are available, you can go to the site and you can actually subscribe to our newsletter. I usually post a newsletter every time there's an article. So I want to say to all of you, thank you again for being with us on another episode of Science Fiction Remnant. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did. It was an amazing honor for us to be able to have the writer and director of one of my favorite sci-fi short films out there. It's great pleasure when we have the opportunity to ask those questions that we would like to have answered. So again, if you are watching or listening, Mr. Adam Stern, thank you so much for being on our show, and thank you to all of you out there for making the show your favorite show. We really, really appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. We thank you, and we hope to see you back on future episodes.
See you soon.
Thank you.